Chapter 3168. Looking at the anticipation in her eyes, I smiled faintly. I've never thought of coming back. It's good to be in America. It's quiet and there's no disturbance. Besides, I'm looking for a job in America. After I find a job, I'll settle down in America. Look, you said it yourself. Don't you feel lonely? I'm used to being lonely. I'm not used to it suddenly being lively. Mom suddenly had nothing to say. With her back to me, she suddenly sighed. Come back, Xiaochuan. I suddenly smiled. Mom, you've forgotten that America is my home. I saw her expression change, but it quickly surfaced with a smile again. She said reproachfully, Look at you, child, what nonsense are you saying? Let's not talk about this anymore. Come in first. I saw her secretly wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes before opening the door. I stood at the door and looked at the entrance for a long time before slowly entering. Mom shouted as soon as she entered, Hubby, our daughter is back. After a while, a figure came out of the kitchen. It was Dad. However, he looked a little old. When I saw him, the only thing I felt was that time had aged people. However, I didn't feel much else. I smiled faintly. Xiaochuan, you're back. Dad chuckled. When he smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened. White streaks silently crept onto his originally black hair. I only nodded and went straight into the house without exchanging pleasantries with him. He probably felt that I was as cold as an outsider and more like a guest in this house. Mom invited me to sit down on the sofa and suddenly asked, Do you want to take a look at your room? My room? I thought it was fun. I hadn't even lived in this house for a day. How could there be a room for me? When you moved in, Dongyu left it for you. He said that if he didn't decorate your room, this house wouldn't feel like home anymore. When I heard Dongyu's name, I nodded. She led me into the room. Although I had a lot of imagination about the room, I was still shocked when I saw the setting of the room. It had the same layout as the room I used to live in. There was a desk, a single bed, a bookcase, and a computer desk. My school bag and workbooks were neatly arranged on the desk, as if they were made of bricks. Behind her, her mother smiled and said, Dongyu will come to your room every day and sit for a while. Then, he'll talk to the photo on the table. She walked up to me. When I was in university, his room was always a mess. But your room is always clean. There's no dust at all. I sat down on the bed. She looked at me and seemed a little uneasy. Then she said, Sit here for a while. Mom will go and help your dad. My cold response made her even more embarrassed. She turned around and left. In her hurry, she forgot to close the door. After she left, I walked around the room and opened the drawer. The diary was still in the same place. I was a little surprised. I hadn't expected the diary to be safe and sound. I originally thought that my mother would definitely tear it up. I picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Suddenly, I felt that there was something wrong with the diary. Under my original handwriting, there were lines of blue handwriting. Chapter 3169. I took a closer look and was stunned. Sonny. When you truly love someone, you want to have all of them. Let go and wish them happiness? But how can there be such selfless love in this world? Below, Dongyu's handwriting was delicate and strong. I once owed you 10,000 apologies, and even more so, I love you. My heart skipped a beat. I flipped another page. At the end, there was still his handwriting. Xiaochuan, are you doing well in America? I tried my best to find your whereabouts and find out how to contact you, but even they don't know the landline of your apartment. Perhaps they're deliberately hiding it from me. I miss you all the time. The deeper the memory, the more pain there is. Pain is like a corner of a sunny day. The more dazzling the sun is, the deeper the shadow. It's because the past was too beautiful that the pain is even more unforgettable. I flipped to the last page. Here, month, day, Dongyu. Have you ever liked me even a little? I love you, but I don't know how deep my feelings are. I slammed the diary shut and stood up abruptly. I looked around and vaguely saw his figure in every corner of the room. The figure who tidied my bookcase. The figure who cleaned my room. The figure who sat at the table and seriously wrote in the diary. The figure who filled this room with all his memories. Your favorite is Harry Potter. I bought the complete collection. You said you wanted to watch a Harry Potter movie the most, so when the movie came out, I bought 2 movie tickets and a bucket of popcorn. I imagined watching the movie with you, imagining the little dimples at the corners of your mouth when you smiled happily. I caught 10 dolls today. In the past, when I wasn't skilled enough to catch the dolls you liked, you always laughed at me. When Wanda department store opened, I caught 10 dolls in one go and placed them by your bed. Fanta soda really doesn't taste good, but when I think about it, it's your favorite drink. Every time I see the bottle, I think of you. Little greedy cat, I bought a lot of snacks. When are you coming back to eat? The snacks are about to expire. The snacks expired and were thrown away. However, I bought a lot of potato chips, your favorite Pringles potato chips. Nowadays, there were very few places that sold this brand of potato chips. Was there any in America? I had a glass doll that I had always carefully protected and cared for. But one day she accidentally fell and broke. I sadly pieced it together and finally managed to piece it back together, but I accidentally lost it. I went back to the station and looked for you as hard as I could, but I could not find you. I lost my doll. Xiaochuan, I miss you. If I write 10,000 lines of I miss you, will you hear my voice? I flipped open the stack of papers in a daze. The originally blank diary was now filled with the words I miss you. They were lined up neatly. Every word and every stroke was neat and tidy. It was as if I could picture his back as he sat at his desk, writing stroke by stroke. Occasionally he flipped to a page. There were tears on it, but they had long since dried up. I slowly ran my fingers over the lines of words. I wanted to close the diary, but my eyes seemed to be bewitched. I couldn't bear to look away. Hugging the diary, my eyes started to sting for the first time in a long time. Chapter 3170. I rubbed the corners of my eyes and closed the diary. I awkwardly hid it under the desk and placed it back in its original position, as if I had a guilty conscience. Suddenly, the sound of the door closing came from outside. Dad, Mom, I'm back. At the same time, a woman's gentle voice followed. Uncle, Auntie, we're back. Have you communicated with the church? Yes. All the details have been communicated. The girl exclaimed happily, how blissful. My greatest wish is to hold a wedding in a church. A man's deep voice suddenly interrupted her. Where is she? Have you picked her up? I vaguely recognized this voice. It vaguely sounded like Dongyu's, but his voice had become stronger. When I left, Dongyu was still in the middle of his puberty. His voice was a little hoarse and was in the process of changing. All these years, we had never spoken on the phone. So much so that when this man's voice reached my ears, I couldn't recognize him. I immediately walked to the door and quietly closed it. Then I locked it from the inside. I did so almost subconsciously, as if I was trying to escape from something. Immediately after, I heard footsteps approaching the room. My breathing suddenly stopped, and I found it difficult to control my breathing freely. My mother said, she just came back. She's resting in her room. Dongyu, is the she you're talking about your sister who's studying abroad? Dongyu, what's wrong with your face? Sure. The man's voice suddenly became gentler. My sister is timid and afraid of strangers. Don't scare her. Mom, take her to the living room. All right. Anning, come with me to the living room. Oh, okay, Auntie. The sound of their footsteps faded away. I leaned back against the door. Then I heard footsteps stop outside the door. The unique sound of leather shoes colliding with the floor made a crisp sound of footsteps. I leaned back against the door and looked out the window with empty eyes. Through the door, I suddenly felt the breathing outside the door become heavier. It was him. I recognized his breathing. We used to be so close. I remembered his breathing and his heartbeat even in my dreams. I turned around in a daze and reached for the door handle, but I didn't unlock it immediately. Duck duck. He knocked on the door softly. Through the door, I couldn't imagine what he looked like now. I could only think of his youthful and handsome face when he was 18 years old. Every frown and smile of his touched my heart. However, 8 years had passed, and he was 26 years old. He should have grown into a mature man by now, right? What would he look like? As I was imagining it, I heard Dongyu say gently from outside the door, "Xiaochuan, I'm the only one left. Can you open the door?" I turned to face the door. My hand that was holding the doorknob suddenly trembled. I opened my mouth. I wanted to call his name, but how did his name become so unfamiliar? His throat seemed to be blocked by something, and he couldn't make a sound. Fear, helplessness, and embarrassment flooded my mind. I slowly let go of the doorknob and retreated. I looked at the door and the outline of his figure. Then I sat down on the bed quietly and hung my head. "Xiaochuan, say something. Are you okay?" Chapter 3171. Dongyu suddenly laughed softly. It was a feathery laugh mixed with a sigh. You don't want to see me?" I didn't move. I looked up at the door again, but no matter what, I couldn't muster up the courage to open it. It's been 8 years. Dongyu, we haven't seen each other for 8 years, but I've been trapped in your world and have never been able to escape. How should I face you? Face your happiness, and then witness you holding another woman's hand and walking into the church to face the priest and promise your loyalty. Time has not only worn away my youth, but also the inexhaustible courage of my youth. It's hard for me to imagine how I once hugged him, kissed him forcefully, coerced him into loving me, and even asked him shamelessly if I could break the restraints and be with him if I let go of all the blood in my body. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Childish. Naive. Thinking back, I still couldn't help but sigh. Now, the person I loved deeply was just outside the door, but I didn't know how to muster the courage to open the door to welcome him. I held his hand and smiled at him like a flower. "Brother, I'm back. It's been 8 years. How have you been?" "Congratulations, you're married. From now on, I'll have to work hard too." "Is that so? Must he be so cruel?" Responding to cruelty with a smile is the cruelest thing, isn't it? What I wanted to ask the most was, "Dongyu, do you really love her? That girl called Anning. Is she the girl you once talked about, the girl you would meet one day, the girl you would get to know, and then make a vow to be with for the rest of your life?" I sat on the bed, not saying a word. Outside the door, I heard my mother's voice. "Dongyu, Xiaochuan has just returned. She's still a little unfamiliar. Besides, she must be tired from the long journey. Let her rest in her room first. We'll have a good gathering tonight." I heard Dongyu take a deep breath. The footsteps of the two people left. I stood up and walked to the door. I opened it secretly and looked at his back through the crack in the door. I caught a glimpse of his back. He was dressed in a handsome suit. He was tall and slender, and his neat black hair was neatly trimmed. At a glance, he had the charm of a mature man. I closed the door again and locked it. It felt like I was escaping from reality. In the afternoon, a knock on the door woke me up. I sat up in bed and heard my mother's voice. "Xiaochuan, are you hungry?" I didn't respond. Her father suddenly said, "Dongyu has already gone out with Anning. He still has some matters to attend to. The wedding is tomorrow, so the arrangements are tight. He'll only be back tonight." I got up and opened the door. My parents were standing outside. They looked at each other. "I was afraid that you would be hungry, so I saved some food for you. Shall I heat it up for you?" I nodded. While we were eating, my mother suddenly handed me a business card. I took the business card with a puzzled expression. "What happened? Do you remember Suchi?" I looked at the business card. It was labeled as General Manager of Nanjia Network Technology Company, Limited, Suchi. I gave him a rare smile. "Suchi? He started a company?" My mother nodded. Seeing me smile, she was also gratified. After graduation, I started my own business. Oh. Chapter 3172. I held the business card in my hand and hesitated. However, I heard my father say, "All these years, Suchi has been coming to our house. This kid is still thinking about you. We haven't seen each other in 8 years. Don't you want to see him?" Suchi, on the balcony, I repeatedly dialed his number and hung up. Holding my phone, I paced back and forth and leaned against the windowsill. I didn't know where to look. "Suchi, I haven't seen him in 8 years. 8 years ago, we parted in a hurry, so he was probably caught off guard. I didn't expect him to be doing so well now that he's started his own company. Things have remained the same, but people have changed. I dialed the number again, but this time, I didn't hang up. Soon, a man's deep and calm voice came from the other end. "Hello, who is this?" "Guess you are?" "You can't recognize my voice." I smiled to hide my embarrassment. "Someone threw your business card at my mother's place. Didn't you want me to call you? Xiachuan?" I heard him choking on his saliva. Su Qi had asked me out to meet him. He was different from the arrogant and flamboyant young man I remembered. Perhaps it was because he had been through the trials of society, or perhaps it was because he had been through 8 years of vanity and vicissitudes. He was also different from his young and frivolous self. Instead, he knew how to ask for my opinion seriously. "Is that skating rink still open?" He was stunned for a moment and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you still know how to skate?" "I can't practice anymore." Compared to facing Dongyu, I wasn't so reserved in front of Su Qi. We agreed to meet at the skating rink where he had taken me to the first time. Nowadays, skating was no longer as popular among young people as it used to be, and business was much worse. The skating rink had obviously been renovated, but it was obvious that it still looked dilapidated after the passage of time. At the door, I saw a man in a white shirt and a pair of black suit pants. He stood at the door and casually hung his suit jacket on his arm. Perhaps he didn't recognize me at first glance. It wasn't until I walked up to him with my hands behind my back and said, "Hey." He turned his head and sized me up. His expression changed. "Xiachuan?" There was a hint of uneasiness and seriousness on his face. Compared to his relaxed demeanor on the phone, he was at a loss now that I was standing in front of him. I clasped my hands behind my back and circled around him. I sized him up and smiled. "Mr. Su, you're very imposing. It's very stylish to wear a suit to the ice rink." My words opened up the atmosphere. Su Qi's expression also relaxed a little. He blinked at me. "Isn't it because someone asked to meet at the skating rink? I naturally have to risk my life to accompany you, my young miss." I looked at him and suddenly recalled that on Dongyu's birthday, he and Lin Li had gone shopping at the Lantern Festival. I had sat at the empty table and looked at the complete cake, crying uncontrollably. In order to coax me, Su Qi quickly cut the cake and started eating. It was as if the more he ate, the happier I would be. I told him, "Su Qi, let's go out." A childlike smile appeared on the face of the always rebellious young man. He held my face and gently asked, "Excuse me, can I ask my girlfriend now?" This Su Qi was really silly. How foolish. Chapter 3173. You make it sound so heroic. Su Qi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After entering the skating rink, I bought a ticket and changed into my old skates. I held onto the wall and struggled to walk to the entrance. Su Qi was already there, waiting for me. "Miss, come, take my hand. I'll skate with you." He held out his palm. I raised my hand and was about to place it on his palm when I suddenly retracted it stubbornly and snorted. "Brother Su Qi, you're underestimating me." He was taken aback. Brother Su Qi, when I was dating him, I liked to call him Brother Su Qi. Occasionally, when I was angry, I'd call him Su Qi. I was also stunned by the way I'd addressed him. I lowered my head and held onto the railing to get on the ice. It had been a long time since I'd last stepped on ice skates. I was really rusty. I had to hold onto the railing as I skated step by step. He was very patient. He accompanied me step by step, slowly sliding down the stairs. "Everything here has changed a lot in the 8 years you've been gone. Only this skating rink remains the same." Even Su Qi found it unbelievable. Young children these days don't like to play this game. I'm also curious as to why this skating rink hasn't closed down yet. I held onto the railing and walked step by step. The road beneath my feet was so difficult, just like the road I'd walked for the past 8 years. It was heavy and unsteady. Su Qi mustered up his courage and asked, "How have you been all these years in America?" I replied, "Yes, everything went well." Perhaps it was because my face was too calm that it wasn't convincing. I asked him, "What about you? How have you been?" Su Qi said bluntly, "Not good." Dongyu and I haven't been doing well. Su Qi said, Xiachun, did you know? After you left, Dongyu seemed to be sick. He went on a hunger strike like a madman. He didn't eat or drink, locked himself in his room, smashed everything he could, and used all the means he could to protest. He told me that if he had been a step too late, he would have found you. He originally wanted to take you away from the city, but due to a freak combination of factors, he returned home and was detained by his father. He desperately returned to the bus station and saw you get on the bus. He couldn't catch up with you no matter how hard he tried. He was frantically looking for you, but he couldn't find you. I suddenly stopped and raised my head to look at him. Why are you telling me this? Su Qi turned around and fixed his gaze on me. After that, Dongyu became anorexic. Once, I saw Auntie kneeling in front of him and carefully pushing the bowl to him. Then she coaxed him and lied to him, saying, eat well, I'll return Xiachuan to you. However, Dongyu still refused to eat. What happened after that? Su Qi smiled. Later, Dongyu received treatment in the hospital for a month before he got better. I don't know what kind of agreement he reached with your parents, but he studied obediently and got into a key university in the country. Then, he graduated and started his own business. How about me? Su Qi smiled self-deprecatingly. Every day after you left, I thought about you. I suddenly didn't dare to look at him anymore. I held the railing and looked ahead. Gritting my teeth, I walked forward. Su Qi caught up with me easily. What's wrong? You don't look right. I avoided him and walked forward. Chapter 3174. He suddenly took my hand and pulled me into his arms. He wrapped his arms around my waist and looked down at me. He looked at me so seriously. His eyes were so dark that they were shining. My embarrassed expression was reflected in his pupils. He curled his lips and asked subtly, Xiachun, tell me, how do you manage to smile so easily? Can you teach me? I was speechless. Su Qi's tone gradually tensed up. Because just looking at you makes my heart ache so much that I can't breathe. I wanted to push him away, but he hugged me tightly again. I was a little angry, but I couldn't bear to be angry. Rather than being angry, it was more appropriate to say that I was completely pathetic. Su Qi looked at me intently. Do you know that your name is like a thorn in my lungs? Every time I breathe, it hurts. When have I, Su Qi, ever been in such a sorry state? There are so many girls chasing after me. I can't figure out how I fell into the hands of a girl like you. I smiled. You have bad taste. Treat it as soon as possible. Su Qi asked me in return, what if I don't want to? I was silent for a long time. Suddenly, I said helplessly, Su Qi, you're 27, right? You should be married, right? I'm not married. I've been waiting for you. I pushed him away in a panic and barely steadied myself. With my back to him, I slid forward awkwardly. It's impossible between us. He caught up with me easily, lingering around. I don't care. I finally couldn't take it anymore and turned around. Even if I don't love you, do you still want to be with me? Su Qi said, I'll make you fall in love with me. I said, Su Qi, don't be like this, okay? I'm already 23, and you're 27. We're not children anymore, so don't say such willful things. He stood in front of me again and pointed at his heart. You have someone in your heart, and similarly, I have you. When you've let go of Dongyu, I'll truly let go of you. Su Qi continued, you keep telling me to let go of you, but why are you forcing others to do something you can't do yourself? I stopped abruptly. He hugged me from behind and said helplessly, there are many things in this world that can't be reasoned with. I love you just like how you love Dongyu. No one can interfere. It has been 8 years. Everything has changed. I pursed my lips and said casually, coming back here feels like I've arrived in a foreign country. 8 years can change a lot of things. Su Qi, you still have many 8 years. I don't have to be involved. Haven't you lived well without me for the past 8 years? Okay? Su Qi turned my shoulder over and gripped it so hard. Okay? Xiachuan, do you know that I went to America to look for you and frantically asked about your whereabouts? I've asked your parents about you, but they didn't say a word. I've been waiting for you to come back for so many years. Yet you say that I've been living well without you for the past 8 years? Which eye did you see it with? Which ear did you hear it with? What do you know? I'm not doing well anywhere. People are always unwilling to accept things that they have never obtained. Chapter 3175. I pretended to be relaxed and said, Su Chi, it's not like anyone can't live without another. I didn't die after leaving Dongyu. However, he expressed his doubts. Really? I looked into his eyes and felt a little evasive. Yes, it's true. Even though I had left him and was in a foreign country, I had never hugged a pillow and curled up in the corner of the apartment, crying my eyes out. I had never lost my appetite for food and drink, staring at the bracelet he had given me and thinking of him. I had never tried my best to earn money in the huge city of Los Angeles to get a plane ticket back home, only to find out that my family had moved and I had lost contact with them. I gripped the plane ticket tightly and cried in despair. I'm alive and well. I smiled faintly. Su Chi smiled weakly and said slowly, I'm not. I've never tried to let go of you. He hugged me even tighter, his voice trembling slightly. But I regret it. I regret it so much. This time, I won't let go before you. Xiachuan, will you be my girlfriend? Let's be together, okay? Whether it's staying in the country or going back to America with you, I'm willing to compromise. As long as you're willing to be with me. Xiachuan, will you promise me? I stood there helplessly. Su Chi used a tough tone and a coquettish one. He repeated it over and over again, as if I didn't agree for even a moment, he would keep pestering me until the end of the world. But I was going to disappoint him. The world wouldn't end, and I wouldn't be soft-hearted and agree to it. I said to him, Su Chi, it's impossible for me to fall in love with anyone again. It's been 8 years and I've changed a lot, but this stubbornness hasn't. Su Chi stared at me and suddenly curved his eyes. Then I should have the right to wait for you. My heart skipped a beat. I'll wait for you. I'll always wait for you. I'll wait until you're willing to be with me. My nose started to sting. Su Chi, why are you so silly? Su Chi suddenly leaned down and rubbed my nose. Because I love you so much, silly. Exhausted, I walked out of the skating rink. Breathing in the fresh air, my originally restless heartbeat calmed down. After saying goodbye to Su Chi, she returned to the apartment and looked at the time. It was already 7 in the evening. I didn't eat dinner, but I didn't feel hungry either. When I thought about the wedding tomorrow, I felt a little uneasy, even a little anxious. As time passed, this anxious feeling grew fiercely. I prefer to think of it as my addiction acting up, so in order to cool down, I walked the half-hour walk from the city center to my apartment. When I reached the bottom of the apartment building, I looked up and saw the lights on the 14th floor. My heart was beating like a drum. I took out the key, but hesitantly looked at the dark window. In the end, I didn't have the courage to open the door. I think I still need to calm down. At the very least, I should learn how to face him with a peaceful mind. It was already late at night, and all the residents in the apartment had turned off their lights. There were only a few white street lamps left in front of the apartment building, but they highlighted the bleakness of the night. Chapter 3176. My greatest achievement after going abroad for the past few years was learning to smoke. I learned to smoke only because sometimes, when I'm anxious and desperate, I need something to fill the void. These few days, my addiction to smoking has been very strong. I've treated it as a form of spiritual food. Whether it's numbing or decadent, at least it can fill the gap in my heart. The sound of a lighter being ignited was exceptionally clear in the silent night. I took a deep breath, and the smoke came out from the tip of my nose. Out of the corner of my eye, I inadvertently saw a shadow on the ground. I followed the shadow and looked up until I saw a pair of cold eyes that were as deep as the abyss. I was instantly stunned on the spot, at a loss for what to do. Dongyu stood motionless under the street lamp. His tall and straight figure was almost the fulcrum of my line of sight. His handsome face looked even fairer under the light. In my memory, he always had a gentle and elegant temperament. But now, this temperament had become a little cold. A pair of cold and deep eyes silently stared at me. His gaze slowly moved down, and finally landed on the cigarette but that was emitting sparks between my fingers. His appearance caught me off guard. I hadn't even thought about what kind of expression I should use to face him. Just like when I was young and did bad things behind his back, I was caught red-handed. I threw away the cigarette in my hand awkwardly, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. He only looked at me in silence. It was as though he wanted to see enough of the past 8 years in this quiet moment. I felt that he seemed a little unfamiliar. I didn't recognize him anymore. If it weren't for his eyes and brows, which were still the same as in my memory, I wouldn't have been able to recognize this man at first glance. He was the Dongyu I'd been longing for. Dongyu, this name gave me joy and sorrow, but I couldn't love him. I'd been thinking about this for 8 years, but I still couldn't figure it out. But fate was really unfair. I clearly knew that it was impossible between him and me. However, when I came to this world alone, he still had to give me hope and tenderness. Then, he used the bloody reality to turn it into a sharp blade and cut my heart into a bloody pulp. Who asked Dongyu to be the only person I could rely on in this vast world? In his childhood memories, he occupied such a large part of the country. I don't know who else I can rely on other than him. Who else can I miss? If he hadn't been such an important part of my life, I definitely wouldn't have fallen into this fate of eternal damnation. I stood there awkwardly, my hands trembling behind my back as I stared down at my toes. I bit my lips out of habit so that it wouldn't seem to be trembling too much. I couldn't pretend to be relaxed and calm in front of him like I did with Su Chi. I even thought of escaping this place and returning to my rented apartment in Los Angeles, hiding in my turtle shell like a turtle. However, Dongyu's gaze never left my face. It was as if he was frozen in place, or as if time had frozen. He looked at me silently, as if he wanted to carve my facial features into his mind, into his bones. After a long time, he finally opened his mouth and spoke in that extremely familiar tone. Xiachuan. Chapter 3177. How many times had I heard him call my name like this in my dreams? Just like when I was young, I would run in front and he would chase after me angrily, calling my name angrily. Just like when he would greet me at the door after elementary school and call my name gently with open arms. Just like when I failed an exam in high school, I would take the test paper home and plead with him for a fake autograph with my palms pressed together. He would call my name in disappointment. Just like countless nights when he would sneak into my room and caress my sleeping face. I would secretly open my eyes a little and hear him call my name. Xiachun Chachun. That voice once overturned rivers and seas in my mind, setting off fierce winds and fierce waves. There had also been countless difficult nights when I recalled it. It was like a silver needle piercing my eardrum, causing me to feel a sharp pain. I had clearly warned myself not to cry easily no matter what, but when I heard him call my name softly, my eyes started to sting. I lowered my head in an extremely sorry state. Taking advantage of the night, I quietly dripped the tears that had welled up in my eyes onto the cement ground under my feet. I secretly pinched my palms so that my voice would sound calmer. Xiachuan, Xiachuan? Perhaps it had been too long since he had called my name, but he kept repeating it. It sounded like he was restraining himself. I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. Brother, I heard you. How many times do you have to call me that? I didn't dare to look up, so I couldn't see the expression on his face. I only heard his deep voice ring out again. Stand there and don't move. As soon as he finished speaking, I heard him take a step forward and walk towards me. I subconsciously retreated until my back was against the wall and there was nowhere to go. It was only when a pair of slender legs came into view that I clenched my fists. All the blood in my body rushed to my head and my back instantly tensed up. Look up and let me take a good look at you. Brother, I'm tired. I want to rest early. Xiachuan, it's your wedding tomorrow. Don't you need to rest early? Xiachuan. He suddenly reached out and hugged me tightly. He said, Xiachuan, there's something I want to say to you. This sentence is 8 years late. I don't know if you still want to hear it. Dongyu's 8-year-old face seemed to appear in front of me. He stood in front of me and waved at me with a smile. He said mysteriously, Xiachuan, come here. I have a secret that I can only tell you. Curious, I leaned over and stood on tiptoe, leaning over his shoulder. He covered my ears and his warm breath brushed against my earlobes. As he whispered to me, the corners of his lips lifted into a beautiful arc. He looked so innocent and cute. I love little sister the most. I came back to my senses and curled the corners of my lips. Just like when I was young, I stood on my tiptoes and placed my hand gently on his shoulder, putting my ear close to his thin lips. Dong Yu covered my ear. In Xiachun, I love you. My eyes widened. Dong Yu's mature and tender words echoed in my ears. I turned to look at him with tears in my eyes. Suddenly I laughed. I looked at him and tried my best to smile, but my eyes were getting sore. It was as if I couldn't see anything clearly. If I had been young, I would have been overjoyed to hear this. I hugged his shoulders and smiled sweetly and contentedly. Chapter 3178. 8 years had passed. Returning to this city made me feel like I no longer had a foothold here. But Dong Yu, thank you. At least in your heart, there was still a place for me. I had waited for these 3 words for 15 years, and then for another 8 years. Perhaps, my youthful obsession had finally been fulfilled. Back then, I had pestered him so much and chased after him for these 3 words. But now that I had matured, hearing these 3 words again did not make me as happy as I had expected. The 15-year-old me longed for an echo of my love, but I received no response. The 23-year-old me hoped that my love would bear fruit, but in the end, it did not. As one grew up, so did one's ambition. However, I gradually learned to bear the pain and let go. I came back probably to bid farewell to this relationship. I giggled foolishly and rubbed away my tears with my hand. However, they couldn't stop flowing. Like a broken dam, they kept falling from the corners of my eyes. However, even though I was crying, I was smiling. It felt like I had been waiting for these 3 words for a century. Dong Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and gazed at me gently with a smile on his face. The curve of his eyes made it seem like he was smiling, but when his gaze landed on my face, it was filled with desperate affection. I saw that his eyes were slightly red. His clear black and white eyes were sparkling. However, he was a 26-year-old man after all. He wouldn't cry so easily like an 18-year-old. I clenched my fists tightly and pinched the corner of my shirt nervously. Pretending to be calm, I said, I saw it in the diary. What you basically wrote in my diary, I wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes and smiled. I saw it all. I thought of the diary again. The originally blank paper was filled with the words I miss you, neatly written stroke by stroke with a blue water-based pen. Dong Yu's face was a little different from the one that was engraved in my mind. He looked even more robust now. In the past, his facial features were mixed with the feminine lines of a youth. He had delicate features and slender bones. Now, he had the heroic spirit of a young man. Especially those sword-like eyebrows, they were perfectly straight and natural. This man was once a young man whom she yearned for day and night. She could never forget him. It was also my nightmare. Every time I dreamed of it, I would wake up abruptly with tears streaming down my face. I had a lot of things I wanted to say to him, but they were stuck in my throat and I couldn't say anything. He seemed to have a lot to say to me, but he didn't say anything from the start to the end. Every girl didn't want to see the man she loved walk into the hall of marriage with another woman hand in hand. It was like a heart attack. But before we get married, can we, brother? I opened my arms and smiled. Can I hug you? Because of these words, Dong Yu's originally well-concealed smile finally cracked. He pulled me into his arms, rubbed my hair, and held my waist tightly. Suddenly he let out a sorrowful sob, crying like a child. Chapter 3179. When I was young, I would often climb trees on all fours and pick wild fruits to eat. After watching so many wuxia dramas, I felt that these wild fruits might be mysterious elixirs. Eating them would give me a certain chance of immortality. When I picked the unripe green fruit and tasted it in my mouth, it tasted sour and bitter without any sweetness. But this was my youth. Some dreams are destined to remain dreams. Some love is destined to be unattainable. Some promises are like bubbles that burst at a touch. Some lies are so realistic that they can deceive myself. But Dong Yu, the worst lie in my life was to lie to myself and say that I don't like you anymore. I closed my eyes and thought that I could forget you, but the tears that flowed didn't lie to me. At the wedding, the church was decorated with fresh flowers and a white veil. It was holy and beautiful. I tidied up the flowers on the arch and turned around to see the bride rushing to the venue with the help of the flower girl. Dongyu was in charge of receiving the guests in the living room while the bride went to the dressing room to touch up her makeup. I walked to the makeup artist with the flowers in my hands and placed a bouquet of roses in a vase. When the bride saw me, she smiled in a friendly manner and pointed at me. "You're Yin Xiaochuan, aren't you?" I turned around and nodded silently. "Dongyu often mentions you." The bride tilted her head and said, "Sometimes, even in his dreams, he often calls your name." My back stiffened, but I pretended to be nonchalant and went about my business. "My name is Ning." "I know your name. But you have to call me sister-in-law in the future." I turned around and asked with a smile, "Sister-in-law, how did you and Dongyu meet?" She was surprised for a moment that I had obediently addressed her as sister-in-law. When she realized my question, she immediately replied, "University classmate." Indeed. I guessed that with Dongyu's cold personality, his social circle would only be limited to his classmates and colleagues. I tidied up the bouquet seriously and asked tentatively, "You must love my brother very much, right? Otherwise, it would be difficult to tolerate his taciturn personality." "Is that how you describe your brother?" And Ning silently observed my actions and suddenly chuckled. "Ha! Marrying him was like a dream. It felt unreal. I love him very much as he loves you." My hand froze as I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you surprised? Why would I know about this?" Anning stood up and walked to me. There were only the two of us in the dressing room. She walked to my side and suddenly bumped my shoulder gently. "You know what? He has never forgotten you. I know that your position in his heart is extraordinary and irreplaceable." I couldn't help but feel puzzled. "If you knew, why did you marry him?" "Because I love him as much as you do. I have no regrets." And Ning smiled, but the smile in her eyes was extremely pure. "If you love someone, you will be so humble that you fall into the dust. Even if his heart belongs to someone else, as long as you can protect him, you will naturally accept it. Don't you think it's unfair?" I smirked. "If the man you love doesn't love you back, then this marriage must be very disloyal." "I don't think so." And Ning continued, "Feelings can be nurtured. However, I know that the only woman he loves deeply will never be with him. To me, isn't that the greatest loyalty?" The stunned look on my face became even more obvious. And Ning enunciated each word clearly. "I will work hard to make him fall in love with me. At the same time, I will be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good sister-in-law." I smiled calmly, but there was no emotion in my eyes. I wish you all the best." I tidied up the bouquet and put it aside before walking out of the door. Behind me, she suddenly said, "I think I'm very lucky. At least, I can marry the man I love." However, I didn't stop for even half a step and just left. I knew that she didn't mean any harm by saying that. She was just trying to prove her love and loyalty to Dongyu. But compared to these words, I had experienced 100 times crueler torture. Outside the church, I stood at the door and raised my head to look at the blue sky. White clouds floated gently. I pinched a rose and played with it with my fingertips. Bit by bit, I plucked off the petals and let them fall to the ground, eventually crumbling into mud. In the end, I still didn't have the courage to witness that scene with my own eyes. I ran out of the door like a deserter, but the vows had officially begun. In the church, the priest's serious voice rang out. "And Ning, are you willing to take this man as your husband and enter into a marriage contract with him? In sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, will you love him, take care of him, respect him, accept him, and be loyal to him until the end of your life?" I lowered my head and took out the ring box from my pocket. I opened it gently. A 1-carat ring lay quietly inside. Brother, when we grow up, will you buy me a ring with a huge diamond inlaid on it like the male leads on TV and put it on my finger personally?" When I was young, I made an innocent wish. Every girl must have a dream about being a bride. I dreamed that one day, I would be able to stand in a holy church and watch him put on my finger with a huge diamond inlaid on it. Then, he would elegantly put it on my ring finger and make a promise to me. However, the ring didn't have to be a 1 carat, and the wedding didn't have to be held in a church. But the man standing opposite me holding my hand had to be that person. On the night before our wedding, he took out this exquisite gift box from his pocket and opened it. Under the moonlight, the 1 carat diamond shone charmingly. It was such an unintentional sentence from his childhood, but he remembered it seriously in his heart. With my back against him, I held this small but exquisite box as if it was a treasure. With tears in my eyes, I smiled contentedly. There were so many illusory dreams in life, and one of them had actually come true. I gently took out the ring and carefully put it on my ring finger. My fingers were pressed together as I looked at the diamond ring. I couldn't help but smile and plant a gentle kiss on the diamond. My lips parted slightly, almost in sync with the voice in the church. "I do. Don't use" voice still echoed in my ears. Chapter 3180. Lu Jinyu hurriedly handed the cuddly little ball over to Yun Shishir. When she was in Yun Shishir's arms, the little girl was still crying badly. However, compared to when she was in Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu's arms, she was a little more restrained. Yun Shishir coaxed her a little, and the rain immediately cleared up. She broke into a smile. When she smiled, her eyes were still filled with tears. Those tears that were like fragments of starlight were contained in her red eye sockets. Her jet-black eyes were like shiny black jade agates. Looking at them, one's heart would soften to the extreme. Her eyes, which had just cried, seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, outlining the beautiful corners of her eyes. She was like an otherworldly little angel. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were about to drool. They were considered to be well-informed and had seen countless people. Many of their friends and relatives had their own fruits of love when they reached the age. However, little Yueyao was definitely the most adorable one they had ever seen. Actually, when the news of Yun Shishir's pregnancy first spread, they had guessed that with Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir's good genes, the daughter would definitely be juicy and beautiful. However, when they saw little Yueyao in full bloom, it was still far beyond their expectations. Jiang Shen was mesmerized by the sight. He was a little regretful. He was young and playful and wasn't in a hurry to find a partner. If he had a wife and a son at this time, he would definitely think of ways to become in-laws with his boss. Such an adorable little princess, who was only a few months old, could already imagine how alluring she would be when she grew up, especially when she cried and smiled with narrowed eyes. That pair of lively eyes could melt one's heart into a puddle of water. However, Lu Jinyu was much more clear-headed than him. He knew that it wasn't easy to become in-laws with his boss. It was obvious to all that old madam loved her daughter dearly. How could she be so easily married to someone else's family and be coveted? She's so young, but she can already recognize people? Jiang Shen found it very interesting. My sister's son only knows how to cry when a stranger hugs him when he's 1 year old. Yu said from the side, "Little sis is very sensitive. She won't let anyone hug her. Even if it was us hugging, little sister seemed to have calculated the time. If you hug her for too long, she won't be happy either." Xiao Yichen added, "Little sister likes me a little more. Every time I hug her, she'll let me hug her a little longer. This means that she prefers me as her brother." When Yu heard this, she was a little unhappy. "What nonsense are you talking about? What a self-righteous fellow. My younger sister clearly likes me more." When I was hugging her, she squinted her eyes and smiled. She was so happy. After coaxing her, Yun Shishir placed her back in the crib. Little did she know that little Yueyao, who was lying in the crib, was probably a little excited when she saw that there were more people around. She waved her little hands and giggled happily. Jiang Shen was curious and quickly took out his phone to take a picture of this loving scene. She looks so good when she smiles. This little girl is so charming. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw her blushing face, as if she was about to do something earth-shattering. He saw her feet in the air and she made a fuss. Then she flipped to the side. Her little feet kicked up, and her whole body flipped over in an instant. Chapter 3181. Xiao Yichen was surprised as well. Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu were stunned as well. They had no idea when the little girl had become so capable. She even knew how to turn things around. They saw the little Yueyao flapping her tiny body and sticking her butt out as she lay on the crib with her back facing the sky. Her tiny hands were clenched into fists as she casually grabbed the doll that was placed at the side. She flapped a few more times before she flipped over and lay on the bed. She held the doll with her two tiny hands and started waving it around. She babbled and her saliva stained the soft towel. Jiang Shen suddenly asked curiously, "Who's changing this little girl's diaper at home now?" Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something and actually burst out laughing. Jiang Shen quickly asked what was going on and why she was laughing for no reason. She then said, "I thought of someone who changed Yueyao's diaper for the first time." He didn't need to guess to know that she was referring to the eldest son. Jiang Shen widened his eyes in surprise. The eldest son knows how to change diapers? It's not like you don't know that he's been longing for a daughter. Look, now that she's born, he's doting on her like a treasure. It's as if he can't wait to do everything himself. When I told him to change the diaper, he wouldn't be able to take it. When I asked him to do it, he was full of confidence and thought nothing of it. He said that changing a diaper was no big deal. In the end, when I undid the diaper, his face was all scrunched up. It smelled so bad. After all, the child was still young. She couldn't control her urine and feces. This diaper couldn't be wrapped all the time. If it got dirty, someone had to change it. In the end, Mu Yaja didn't think it was a big deal. However, when he undid the diaper and smelled it, the smell was unforgettable. According to Mu Yaja's own description, at that moment, the smell was so bad that he wanted to go to the heavens. Although the smell was a little unpleasant, it didn't stop Mu Yaja from loving the little princess. After smelling it a lot, he got used to it. In the beginning, when they were still in the hospital, most of the time, it was the confinement nanny who took care of them. When they returned home, he did it himself. He said that his daughters but smelled good. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, even she felt a little jealous. She watched as Mu Yaja took good care of the little princess, regardless of whether it was feeding her milk, comforting her, or changing her diapers. She gradually got used to it and was no longer so clumsy. Things started to go smoothly. Sometimes, when the two of them finally had some time together, she would hug him and joke that she had been born in the wrong body. When Mu Yaja asked her why, she said half seriously, "Why do I want to be your daughter more than your wife?" "Papa Yaja." As soon as she said this, Mu Yaja pressed her down and pecked the corner of her lips lightly. He said playfully, "It seems that I have indeed neglected someone these few days." He served his daughter well, but neglected his wife. "Madam, how do you want me to make up for it?" Yun Shishir punched his chest. "You have to go to work and wake up at night to take care of the little one. How can you still be so energetic?" "The moment I see you, I'm full of energy." Chapter 3182. After giving birth to her daughter, she had completely become a little worm who only cared about eating, drinking, and sleeping well. This man had taken care of all the chores, so she felt that there was nothing else to do. Yu said, "Mommy, you can be like other rich ladies and go shopping at the mall when you have nothing to do. You stay at home all day. No wonder you have so much free time." "I don't like to play with those rich ladies who are too effeminate," Yun Shishir said and continued, "I'm happier and more free at home." Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen did not dare to stay for too long. They had come out this time without telling a certain man. If Mu Yaja found out that they had traveled thousands of miles during their lunch break to secretly touch his daughter, he would definitely be furious. Seeing that it was almost time to go to work, they hurriedly said goodbye and hurriedly returned to the office dejectedly. In the evening, Mu Yaja returned home after work. Yun Shishir went to the entrance to welcome him. He hurriedly kissed her cheek and eagerly walked to the crib. Yun Shishir stayed where she was, feeling flustered. She turned around and saw a certain man happily walking to the crib. He bent down and hurriedly carried the little princess in his arms. He did not even look at the little girl who was sleeping soundly at the moment. He did not care. He had not seen his daughter for a day and missed her dearly. He did not know why, but after an entire day of work, Whenever he thought of his daughter's pink and tender face, his heart seemed to be filled with something. This was probably the feeling of happiness. Once there was weight in his heart and someone he cared about, his heart would have long drifted back home while he was in the office. This did not mean that he was biased and neglected the mother and children because of the little princess. It was just that Yu was a little tsundere and did not rely on him that much. She was a mischievous child. As for Xiao Yichen, perhaps because he had been too strict with his son since he was young, Xiao Yichen had always respected his father. As for his little Yueyao, every time she saw him, she would reveal an extremely dependent expression. When he hugged her, she would also look at him with her bright eyes. Her two small hands would occasionally pat his cheeks, and at other times, she would tug at his tie. It always gave him a feeling of being deeply relied on. Men like to be relied on. Mu Yaja hugged Yueyao lovingly. He looked up and asked, "Have you changed Yueyao's diapers?" "I've already changed it for her." Yun Shirshir walked to his side and sat down. She rested her chin on his shoulder and looked at him. Little Yueyao was still asleep. When he carried her, his movements were very careful, afraid that he would wake her up. Now, she was like an obedient kitten, snuggling in his arms. Her mouth was moving and she was even bubbling. Yun Shirshir reached out with her finger, popped the bubble and laughed. "She's sleeping soundly." Mu Yaja gently patted her back. He looked up and met her eyes, and the corners of his lips curled up. He suddenly said, "For the past few days, I've been discussing the details of the wedding with the wedding planner. However, the theme of the wedding hasn't been decided yet. When they came back, they wanted me to ask you what theme and style you would like for the wedding." "Style?" "The decorations of the venue." Yun Shirshir said, "How would I know about these things?" "You can decide." Chapter 3183. I don't really understand. I don't know what the theme and style are. Mu Yaja changed the topic and asked her, "Do you like Chinese weddings or Western weddings?" This question stumped her. Chinese weddings were red and gold, or red and black. It was steady and passionate, traditional yet novel, and extremely solemn. Most importantly, Chinese weddings had phoenix coronets and red robes. The classical charm was hard for many women to resist. Speaking of China's traditional culture, there was still a lot of charm to it. Imagine wearing a gorgeous Han costume, phoenix coronets, and red robes. It must be a unique and beautiful scene. However, most weddings nowadays were Western weddings. The most eye-catching feature of Western weddings was the holy and beautiful wedding dress. Holy and snow white. Whether it was the style of a fishtail or the style of a princess's tutu, every wedding dress had its own characteristics. Flowers, an arch, a sacred and solemn vow, a custom-made wedding cake, and a champagne tower were also not bad. Yun Shirshir was a little conflicted because whether it was a Chinese wedding or a Western wedding, she liked them both. Yun Shirshir frowned and was a little hesitant. "I like the solemnity of Chinese weddings and the elegance of Western weddings. I like phoenix coronets and red robes, and I also like holy and pure wedding dresses. So, if you ask me whether a Western wedding or a Chinese wedding, I like both. It's really hard to choose. Since it's hard to choose, then let's do both styles together." Yun Shirshir was a little stunned. "Oh my God, these two styles don't fit together. How can they be done together? An outdoor lawn wedding and an indoor Chinese wedding. Since you like both, it's not like you don't have the qualifications." Yun Shirshir asked again, "What about you? Which kind of wedding do you prefer?" Mu Yaja smiled. His gaze fell on the sleeping face of the little one in his arms. He said gently, "As long as the person standing in front of me and swearing to me is you, any style is fine." He really didn't care about the style. He liked the person who walked into the wedding hall with him. When the day came, he was afraid that when she walked in front of him, the whole world would be overshadowed in that instant. Whether it was the Chinese style or the Western style, he probably didn't have time to care about it. In his eyes, there was only her. He couldn't see anything clearly. He couldn't see anything. On that day, at that moment, what could be more beautiful and eye-catching than her standing in front of him? How could Yun Shirshir know what he was thinking? Seeing that he threw the question back at her, She started to feel conflicted again. Hubby, am I being too greedy? You like the Western style, but you also want the Chinese style? Before she finished speaking, the little guy in her bosom suddenly kicked his legs. She didn't know if this was a dream, or if he was dreaming about something, but after kicking twice in a row, it actually woke her up. Before she even opened her eyes, her tears had already fallen. It was probably because he had been sleeping well and was woken up by her. The little guy was also a little angry when he woke up. He couldn't wake up and was in a terrible mood. He groaned a few times and actually cried out in grievance. Mu Yaja hurriedly coaxed her. He kissed her forehead, patted her back, and said in a low voice, Yueao, don't cry. Yueao, don't cry. Chapter 3184. It's all your fault. Yun Shirshir blamed him. You wanted to hug her the moment you came back. She's still sleeping. It's not like you don't know that the little one cries when she's not awake. Mu Yaja didn't think much of it. It's been a hard day. Isn't it only right to come back and hug my little princess? As he spoke, he gently kissed little Yueao's forehead as a form of consolation. Seeing that she was crying, he coaxed her patiently without the slightest bit of impatience or helplessness like a newbie stay-at-home dad. He was already able to handle little Yueao's cries with ease. He suddenly took out a small red brocade box from his pocket. It looked very exquisite. He handed the box to her and gestured, "Open it and take a look." Yun Shirshir took it curiously and looked at him. Puzzled, she asked, "What's this?" "Open it and you'll know." Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows and opened the box. Inside the box lay a small but exceptionally exquisite longevity lock made of pure silver. Longevity locks, also known as longevity strands, were usually worn during a 100-day banquet or when a child was 1 year old. The longevity lock was worn to prevent diseases and spirits from invading and harming the child. In ancient times, people believed that once a child wore a lock, he or she would be able to grow up safe and sound. Longevity locks were mostly made of pure silver and were engraved with the words, "Long life and riches." People believed that locks were sealing devices. Once a door or box was locked, it could only be opened with a key. Therefore, it was believed that longevity locks could lock up health and life. This was a rather superstitious way of saying it. At first, Mu Yaja didn't pay much attention to this. After all, he didn't have much experience and didn't understand many of the more traditional rules and sayings. However, on the 100-day banquet, a female guest suddenly asked, "Why didn't you give the child a longevity lock?" When Mu Yaja heard this, he was a little puzzled. What was a longevity lock? Thus, the upper-class lady explained it to him. Mu Yaja didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home from work today, he didn't know why, but he went to the jewelry store and chose a nice design. He bought a longevity lock for his little Yueao. Longevity lock? Yun Shirshir was surprised and said coquettishly, "Didn't you say that these are all superstitions and not to be believed?" Mu Yaja's face turned red with embarrassment. Then he explained seriously, "Although it's a superstition, it's reasonable that it exists. I'd rather believe it." Yun Shirshir took the longevity lock in her hand and rubbed it with her fingers. She said, "You can't just buy a longevity lock just because you want it." When Yueao was 12 years old, he still had to remember to ask for a golden key to restore it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective and sincere enough. Actually, I think that there are some traditions that you either don't believe in. If you believe in them, you have to believe in them sincerely and revere them. As she said this, she put the longevity lock around little Yueao's neck. As she put it on for her, she made a sincere wish in her heart. "I hope that Yueao will be safe and sound in this life, and live a long life of wealth and prosperity." She didn't know why, but when she fastened the longevity lock, little Yueao blinked and stopped crying. How strange. Chapter 3185. She sucked on her finger, looked at Yun Shirshir, and then looked at Mu Yaja. Suddenly she was so excited that she danced. "Yaya?" She reached out with her saliva and slapped Mu Yaja's face. Her saliva got all over his face. Yun Shirshir was amused. Mu Yaja also laughed. He looked at Yueao and then at her. She won't cry when she's locked. Sometimes, some things are really hard to explain. I always feel like there's a deep mystery behind it. She's just like that. She cries one moment and is happy the next. She loves it when you and little Jia hug her the most. Especially you. No matter how aggrieved she cries, she'll stop crying when she's in your arms. As Yun Shirshir spoke, she harumphed indignantly. They say that daughters are close to their fathers. I think this is true. It's not a lie at all. Aren't you close to her? Yun Shirshir tilted her head and said, It's not that we aren't close. It's just that when she cries, I'll coax her for a long time, but she won't smile. Do you know? Sometimes she's very adorable. When she's lying in the crib alone and Yu suddenly sticks her head in, she'll get a fright and start crying. Sometimes she's very smart. She knows that when she cries, many people will fight to hug her. But when it comes to hugging her, she recognizes people very well. If the person hugging her isn't the person she wants, she'll continue crying. For example, Hua Jin. Sometimes when Hua Jin hugs her, she'll still cry. It's only when little Jia hugs her that she slowly stops crying. Isn't it a good thing that the child is smart? If she's as dumb as Xiao Yichen, then she'll be done for. Mu Yaja felt that it was only right. Xiao Yichen was passing by the living room when he suddenly heard these words. It was as if a huge black pot had been smashed on the back of his head. He felt as if he had been shot even though he was lying down. He covered his chest and complained unhappily, Daddy, you're talking bad about me behind my back again. Yu walked past Xiao Yichen and saw that Mu Yaja was carrying little Yueyao like a slave to his daughter. She suddenly fanned the flames and said, Xiao Yichen, look, ever since your little sister was born, your position in Daddy's heart has been getting lower and lower. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yichen felt even more aggrieved. Unable to contain his anger, he threatened, Daddy, don't forget that you have to work during the day. When I was at home, I talked bad about you in my sister's ears every day. How dare you? Mu Yaja took his words seriously and glared at him. You're not allowed to speak ill of Daddy in front of Yueyao. Then why did you call me dumb in front of little sister? Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and said, If little sister finds out that I'm dumb and bullies me when I grow up, then no one will dote on me and love me. How old is little sister? How would she understand if I called you dumb? Since little sister doesn't understand, then I'll continue to speak ill of you in the future. Anyway, Daddy has already said that little sister is too young to understand. At this moment, his mind was spinning rapidly. Mu Yaja couldn't argue with him, so he could only take a step back and say, Daddy was wrong. Daddy won't call you dumb in the future. Xiao Yichen was finally satisfied. His eyes were sharp as he curiously ran over to Yueyao. He stared straight at the shiny silver longevity lock around her neck and asked curiously, What is this? A longevity lock. Yun Shirshir explained the meaning of the longevity lock to him. Chapter 3186. I have one. Mommy told me that she gave it to me when I was 1 year old. But I'm allergic to it, so I don't wear it often. Xiao Yichen was even more dejected. He lowered his head dejectedly. When Mu Yaja saw this, he felt a little upset. He owed this little guy too much. He admitted that ever since Mu Yichen was born, the Mu family had provided him with the best food and clothing. However, among the 3 children, the Mu family had given him the least care and attention. Not to mention the longevity lock, Mu Yaja rarely participated in Xiao Yichen's birthday. He rarely planned or prepared anything for him. Most of the time, it was the servants who prepared everything and reminded him in advance. Then, he would send someone to buy a birthday present. If Xiao Yichen wanted something, he would send someone to buy it for him. Mu Yichen's personality was actually very lively. This could be seen when he was 1 year old. However, at that time, Mu Yaja didn't have much experience in taking care of children. He was also very strict with him. Children loved to play and were very active. Sometimes, it was normal for him to accidentally bump into things or break things. However, at that time, Mu Yaja did not know how to educate his son. Sometimes, he was so concerned that his son would break something. He was worried that he would hurt himself again if he was careless again. Hence, he punished him by making him face the wall to reflect on his mistakes. However, The child subconsciously thought that he had caused trouble and made Mu Yaja unhappy. He didn't realize that this was a father's concern. After all, the child was still young. In terms of understanding, it was difficult for him to understand a father's love and care. It was also difficult for him to understand the concern of an elder. When he was a little older, Mu Yaja threw him into the special training camp to suffer. After returning from the special training camp, Xiao Yichen seemed to have changed into a different person. He went from being lively and active to being reserved like a little iceberg. In reality, he was just trying to equip himself. When the mother and son reunited and returned to Yun Shishir's side, his most primitive honesty and innocence gradually revealed itself. Why else would it be said that when it came to family, no matter who the child left, the child couldn't do it? His father was his backer, his sense of security. Mother is the harbor, the greatest warmth. Without any one of them, home would no longer be home. Looking at Xiao Yichen's disappointed face, Mu Yaja realized that he had always neglected Xiao Yichen. In the past, it was because he was a new father and did not know how to manage the relationship between him and his child. When the mother and son reunited, he returned to Yun Shishir's side and spent time with Yu. Xiao Yichen considered himself to be the older brother, so he learned to be mature and knew how to take care of Yu. However, everyone had forgotten that even though Xiao Yichen was the older brother, he was only a few minutes older than Yu. Furthermore, he was only 7 years old. The crybaby got candy, but the mature one's feelings were always neglected. Mu Yichen didn't know what his daddy was thinking. When he saw that his daddy was looking at him, he thought that he was being willful. He immediately said, I didn't say that I must have a longevity lock. I was just teasing daddy. Come here. Mu Yaja called out to him. His tone instantly became gentle. Xiao Yichen was a little bashful. What's wrong? Chapter 3187. Come here. When Mu Yaja called again, Xiao Yichen walked over awkwardly. Mu Yaja held his hand and pulled him in front of him. Then, he brushed his hair aside and planted a kiss on his forehead. Daddy will make it up to you, okay? Xiao Yichen's face turned strangely red all of a sudden. He thought to himself, what's wrong with Daddy? Why is he being so gentle to me for no reason? He couldn't get used to it. Upon hearing that he was going to make it up to him, Xiao Yichen was naturally delighted. He quickly nodded and said, okay, but this way, my sister, Yu, and I will all have longevity locks. When Yun Shishir heard this, she thought it was a little strange. She rebuked him and said, didn't you give Xiao Yichen a longevity lock when he was 1 year old? She had wanted to give Yueyao a longevity lock when he was 1 year old. It was too early for the 100-day banquet, so she wasn't in a hurry to give it to him. However, she didn't expect this man to give Yueyao one even though he didn't seem to care. She was a little surprised by his thoughtfulness. However, when she heard that Xiao Yichen didn't have one, she was a little surprised. She thought that Xiao Yichen had one, but he wouldn't wear it like Yu. However, Mu Yaja said, I didn't know there was such a thing as a longevity lock. You're a father after all. You can't ignore the older ones. Otherwise, you'll be suspected of being biased. Yun Shishir harumphed. She was obviously on Xiao Yichen's side. Mu Yaja humbly listened to her advice. Madam is right. Yun Shishir was amused when she heard this. She and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and smiled. At night, the family showered and went to bed. Yun Shishir lifted the blanket and moved towards Mu Yaja. She hugged him and said, Hubby, don't you think that you didn't care enough for Xiao Yichen when he was young? Mu Yaja nodded and heard her say, Today, I saw Xiao Yichen's face looking a little lonely when he saw that little Yueyao also had a longevity lock. My heart aches when I look at it. There was a hint of reproach in her tone. Mu Yaja patted her back gently, but didn't deny it. When Mu Yichen was young, I really didn't care much about him. At that time, there weren't any capable assistants in the consortium. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were still young and inexperienced, so I had to take care of a lot of work. Hence, I rarely had time to spare on him. Yun Shishir expressed her understanding. After all, no matter how capable a man was, he didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, nor was he made of iron. From a certain point of view, Mu Yaja was indeed good at educating children, but it was also remarkable. At least, Xiao Yichen wasn't like those spoiled rich second-generation heirs. This proved that Mu Yaja had put in a lot of effort in educating children. However, as a father's love wasn't as gentle as a mother's. She had been absent from Xiao Yichen's childhood. Without a mother's love, she felt guilty. Mu Yaja continued, perhaps it's because the circumstances are different now. At that time, Xiao Yichen's definition of me was that I had this child under Grandpa's orders to continue the family line. But now that I think about it, I feel guilty. Chapter 3188. Mu Yaja said, as a father, I didn't fulfill my responsibilities. But I'll be more careful in the future. I don't want the little guy to feel neglected again. As he spoke, he covered her with a thin blanket. The weather had turned cold, and he was worried that she would catch a cold. She took note of his silent thoughtfulness. She hugged his shoulders and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. Good night. The next day, when Mu Yaja got off work, he went to the jewelry store and chose a longevity lock of another design. When he got home, he didn't carry Yueyao as he usually did. Instead, he carried the gift box mysteriously and walked to his room. Xiao Yichen was playing a game on his phone. When he walked over, he saw that he was controlling an exquisite character to push a tower. Mu Yaja didn't know what game it was, but he didn't disturb him. When the word victory appeared on the screen, Xiao Yichen turned around and was shocked by the man who suddenly appeared behind him. Daddy! He was so scared that he patted his chest lightly with his hand and said with lingering fear, Daddy, why are you standing behind me without saying anything? When did you come back? Not long ago. I saw that you were playing a game, so I didn't disturb you. Mu Yaja patted his head and asked, what game are you playing? Mu Yichen continued, you won't understand even if I tell you. Have you heard of Mobile Legends? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. He didn't play games, so how could he have heard of this game? Xiao Yichen obediently put his phone in the drawer and kept it well. He usually played games very happily, but he knew when to stop. When the whole family was around, he would never play with his phone continuously. After all, the only time the whole family could gather together was at night. Xiao Yichen only played games when he was bored. When the whole family was around, he wouldn't play. Yi was the same. No matter how busy he was, he would put down all his work as soon as Mu Yaja returned home. Mu Yaja took out a box from his pocket and opened it in front of him. Xiao Yichen looked at him curiously as he took out a longevity lock from the box and strung it with a red string. Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. Is this the longevity lock you put on your sister yesterday? Yeah. Mu Yaja continued, Daddy was careless in the past and forgot to put one on you. Little Yichen glanced at him reproachfully from the corner of his eyes before his lips curled into a warm smile. It's not bad that you remembered to put one on me now. He stood up and obediently stood in front of Mu Yaja. He was now as tall as the man's waist, but for the sake of convenience, Mu Yaja still had to kneel on one knee in front of him and fasten the longevity lock around his neck. After he fastened it, Xiao Yichen pinched the longevity lock with a satisfied smile on his face. Thank you, Daddy. He hugged his shoulders and gently kissed him on the cheek. Mu Yaja suddenly thought of something. Xiao Yichen, I have something to discuss with you. Yeah. I'm going to try on gowns with Mommy tomorrow. You stay at home and take good care of your sister, okay? Chapter 3189. Mu Yaja flicked him on the forehead. Idiot. What other gown could it be? Of course, it's Mommy's gown for the wedding. Xiao Yichen held his forehead in pain. However, his eyes lit up when he heard that they were going to try on the gown for the wedding. Wow. Have you decided on the wedding plan? Your mommy and I agreed that it would be more meaningful to have the wedding in a traditional Chinese style. Xiao Yichen was surprised. A traditional Chinese style? Does that mean that Daddy is going to wear a very loose traditional Chinese costume like the ones on TV? The planner suggested that I wear a suit and she wear a traditional Chinese costume. Mu Yaja added, your little sister can't be alone at home, so I won't be bringing you guys along. When we come back, I'll show you how the gown will look like. Xiao Yichen clapped his hands happily. During dinner, Mu Yaja told you about this. Yu Yu was overjoyed when he heard that he would be at home taking care of his little sister. He promised that he would take good care of his little sister. Mu Yaja was very assured that the two little rascals would be guarding little Yueyao. Hence, the next day he left the house very early with Yun Shirshir. Xiao Yichen woke up very early, but Yu Yu woke up even earlier than him. He was already in the living room and was holding little Yueyao in his arms. Xiao Yichen felt a little indignant when he saw this. "Why are you up so early? I went to bed earlier than you, so naturally, I woke up earlier." As Yu Yu said this, he thought that if he didn't wake up earlier, Xiao Yichen would hold little Yueyao first. Would he still have a chance then? He couldn't beat him, so he could only take the initiative. Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and sat down beside Yu. He looked at Yueyao, who was still sleeping in his arms. When he saw the little girl nestled in his arms, he couldn't help but want to tease her. Thus, he took the sterilized pacifier and rubbed it against her mouth. In her dreams, Yueyao could vaguely feel a familiar shape. She subconsciously opened her small cherry mouth and licked it. Then, she sucked on the pacifier with her eyes closed, enjoying the taste. Yu Yu was amused by her adorable reaction. He looked at Xiao Yichen and smiled. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "Has little sister's favorite toy been sterilized?" "Not yet. Go!" Yu Yu hurriedly urged. "When little sister wakes up, it will be too late for her to play with her toys." Xiao Yichen was extremely unwilling to be sent to work. He still wanted to see his little sister's sleeping face. Such a beautiful sleeping face was monopolized by this fellow. How could he not feel good in his heart? However, on second thought, Xiao Yichen still went happily when he remembered that he was working for his little sister. When he was done sterilizing the toy and came back with it, little Yueyao had already woken up. Yu Yu carried her to the crib, then took a hot towel and carefully wiped her face. Little Yueyao had a full sleep, so she was especially energetic. She kicked her legs as if she was pedaling a bicycle. At this moment, the sun had risen outside the window. Chapter 3190. Okay, but we'll have to wait until we're done feeding her and changing her diapers. Yu Yu nodded. The two little guys busied themselves again. After they were done feeding her and changing her diapers, they placed little Yueyao in the stroller. Then, they placed little Yueyao's favorite toy in the stroller and pushed it out the door. Although the stroller wasn't tall, Yu wasn't as tall as Xiao Yichen, so Xiao Yichen was in charge of pushing the stroller. Yun Shirshir had moved to Yun Shanshir to take care of her pregnancy. After she returned home from the confinement center, the whole family moved back to Xiangdi Walk. The main reason was that Xiangdi Walk was a bungalow with a garden, so it wasn't very big. Moreover, she missed the garden full of Chinese roses. After living there for so long, she had gotten used to living there. Xiangdi Walk had a huge garden. The residents who lived there would take a stroll in the garden every morning when the weather was good. Xiao Yichen pushed the stroller and walked halfway out the door. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "Oh, I forgot to bring my milk bottle. I'll go back and get it." Yu Yu nodded and pushed the stroller to the side of the stone bench. Then he sat on the stone bench. In the stroller, little Yueyao hugged the toy with both hands. She loved it so much that she couldn't put it down. Her clear black and white eyes seemed to have a mind of their own. As she blinked, her eyelashes fluttered like the wings of a butterfly. She was extremely mesmerizing. Yu Yu was mesmerized just by looking at her blinking eyes. She was so mesmerized by the toy that she was playing with it. It was as though she was extremely satisfied with the toy in her hands. Children were especially innocent by nature and were easily satisfied. Yu Yu lay beside the stroller and lowered her head to watch her play. Unlike other children, the little Yueyao was especially quiet. Usually, when she had a toy in her hand, she would ignore everything else around her. She would hug the toy and play with it for a long time. Yu Yu felt a little lonely, so he said to her, "Yueyao, oh Yueyao, is this toy that fun?" He was a little jealous. Although he was the one who designed the toy, he felt a sense of accomplishment seeing how much his sister liked the toy he designed. But then again, little Yueyao just hugged the toy and played with it lovingly. She didn't even look at him. When he talked to her, she ignored him. She didn't even look at him. He felt defeated. He gently poked her chubby little face with his finger. Little Yueyao immediately reached out and pushed his hand away. Her other hand gripped the toy tightly, as though she was afraid that someone would snatch it from her. Seeing this, Yu reached out to grab it. Little Yueyao's face immediately revealed a fierce expression. She hugged the toy tightly with both hands with an overbearing expression that said, "You're not allowed to snatch my toy." This expression actually resembled Daddy's. Sometimes, when Daddy was angry, he would frown and glare fiercely at people, just like her expression now. Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw her expression. The more he wanted to tease her, the more he reached out to grab the toy from her arms. Chapter 3191. She was quite stubborn. If it had been any other child, they would have burst into tears by now. However, it was said that this sister of his didn't like to cry and rarely shed tears. She would only cry when she was feeling uncomfortable or hungry. Yu raised the toy and said with a smile, "If you have the ability, come and snatch it from me." Little Yueyao seemed to understand his words. She wrinkled her little nose and waved her hands, touching the pull tab on the crib. The pram was very well equipped. In order to train the baby's ability to sit, it was equipped with a very sturdy pull tab. When little Yueyao saw the pull tab, it was as if she had seen a new world. She pulled on the pull tab and lifted her upper body slightly. Her legs kicked and she actually sat up straight. Yu was completely stunned. Little Yueyao wasn't even 6 months old yet. The confinement nanny had said that the child would only be able to learn how to sit up independently when she was 6 months old. However, it hadn't even been 6 months and she was already sitting up on her own. Yu was extremely surprised. It took him a while to react. He exclaimed to Yueyao, "Yueyao, you can actually sit up on your own." He was a little excited and even more amazed that little Yueyao could actually sit up on her own. He was extremely excited. However, little Yueyao did not seem to understand his words. Her gaze was still fixed on the toy in his hand. Her 2 little hands reached out, wanting to grab the toy. "All right. I won't snatch it, I won't snatch it. Here you go." Yu immediately handed the toy over. However, her little legs were still kicking so hard that the toy was sent flying a few meters away. Seeing that the toy had been sent flying, Yu stood up to retrieve it. Suddenly, he thought of something and immediately turned around. He first fixed the wheels of the pram and then turned back. He saw that an 8-year-old boy had already bent down to pick up the toy. He smiled knowingly, walked over, and smiled at the boy. "Thank you." The boy raised his head and looked at him strangely. He asked, "Why are you thanking me? Aren't you picking up toys for me?" Yu looked at the toy in his hand and said, "If you help me, I'll definitely have to thank you." The boy looked down at the toy. It was a rainbow pony. He had never seen this toy before, so he hugged it tightly and refused to let go. When Yu saw this, she immediately said, "This is my sister's toy." The little boy rudely interrupted him, "I don't care whose toy it is. Just because you say it's yours, it's yours? I picked it up, so it's mine." Yu did not expect him to be so unreasonable. He wanted to take his sister's toy for himself. "Please return the toy to me." The boy snorted and turned to leave. Seeing that he was being so unreasonable, Yu immediately rushed up and grabbed his sleeve. The boy turned around, frowned, and pushed him violently to the ground. "I said that I picked it up, so it's mine. Didn't you hear me?" Caught off guard, Yu was pushed to the ground. She was in so much pain that her eyebrows were twisted. Seeing this, the boy didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. Chapter 3192. Seeing that Yu was in pain from the fall, Yueyao knew that he was not feeling well. She was probably afraid as well, for she was so frightened that her face turned red and she started crying. Sob, sob, sob. Seeing that she was crying, the boy did not think much of it. He took the toy and was about to leave. But how could Yu let him go? This toy was Yueyao's favorite. As her older brother, he naturally saw it as his responsibility to protect his younger sister. Hence, he quickly got up from the ground. Before he could even pat the dust off his body, he stood in front of the boy and opened his arms, preventing him from leaving. "Return the toy to my younger sister." "Why should I?" The boy was sloppy and looked like a little emperor who had been spoiled by his family. He was rude and unreasonable. "Come and take it from me if you can." When Yu heard this, he really pounced on him and tried to snatch the toy back. The boy immediately raised the toy high. After all, he was an 8-year-old child and his height was about the same as Xiao Yichen's. He was much taller than Yu, so he could not reach the toy even if he stood on his tiptoes. He said angrily, "Hurry up and return the toy to me. Otherwise, I won't go easy on you." When the boy heard this, he frowned and reached out to push him. "You won't go easy on me? How are you going to go easy on me?" With each push, Yu took a step back. The boy seemed to think that Yu was thin and petite, but he looked delicate and weak. He seemed to think that he was easy to bully. Hence, he was particularly arrogant and pushed him back forcefully. Behind Yu was a flight of stairs. His heel tripped on the stairs and he fell onto the lawn. Yu was so angry that his eyes were red. He was extremely indignant. What made him angrier was that someone had bullied Yueyao and him, but he could not retaliate at all. He felt that he was too weak and could not protect Yueyao. When he thought of this, he felt especially aggrieved, and his eyes turned red. Xiao Yichen came back with the milk bottle. From afar, he could hear Yueyao crying loudly. He thought that Yueyao was going to drink milk, so he immediately ran over. However, he saw Yu being pushed onto the lawn. Beside him, an 8-year-old boy was casually pulling up weeds from the ground and throwing them at him. "What are you doing?" Xiao Yichen immediately walked over and pushed him away. When he turned around, he saw Yu lying on the ground and immediately reached out to help him up. "Yu, what do you think? Are you hurt?" The boy sized up Xiao Yichen and was a little surprised. The child in front of him was different from Yu's thin and small frame. He was tall and well-built, and he was wearing a short-sleeved shirt that revealed his arms. Even though he was only 8 years old, one could already see the clear lines of his muscles. However, the two children looked very similar, as if they were cast from the same mold. They were like fierce little lions. When Yu saw him, he stubbornly endured the humiliation and did not say a word. However, when he saw the corner of his shirt and dirty pants, he knew that his little brother had been bullied. Xiao Yichen turned around and glared fiercely at the boy. He ordered righteously, "Apologize to my little brother." "Why should I apologize? You bullied my little brother, so you should apologize." Yu said to Xiao Yichen, "Brother, he even bullied little sister and stole her toys." Chapter 3193. The boy only got a shock when he walked up to Xiao Yichen, who was standing in front of him, was half a head taller than him. Little Yichen looked down at him condescendingly, his eyes filled with fury. "I asked you to apologize. Did you hear me?" His deep voice was almost roaring into the boy's ears. The boy's eardrums hurt from the roar. However, his mouth was still sharp as he retorted, "Why should I?" The boy was already feeling guilty. He clenched his fists and couldn't help but feel unsteady on his feet. After all, in front of Xiao Yichen's domineering aura, his aura was instantly crushed. However, even though his aura had weakened, his mouth was still as stubborn as a leopard whose territory had been invaded. However, it was impossible for him to lower his head. At home, he had always been treated like an emperor. Ever since he was young, no one had dared to speak to him so loudly and with such a fierce tone. He lifted his head to look at Xiao Yichen. His neck straightened as though he couldn't accept it. He sneered, "Who do you think you are? Why should you speak to me like that?" At the side, little Yueyao was still crying hard. She rubbed her eyes and cried until her voice was hoarse. Yu immediately walked over and picked her up. He gently patted her back and comforted her. Perhaps little Yueyao's aggrieved and heartbroken cries had triggered him, but Mu Yichen immediately grabbed him by the collar and pulled him in front of him. He said to him word by word, "I'm warning you. If you don't apologize, don't even think about leaving this place." The boy was completely frightened. His eyes reddened and sparkled as though he was going to cry in the next second. "I won't. Return the toy to my sister. Don't touch my sister's toy with your dirty hands." Xiao Yichen snatched the toy away from the boy without giving him a chance to explain himself. When the boy saw this, he was completely subdued by Xiao Yichen's aura. He was so frightened that he fell to the ground and burst into tears. Not far away, a woman dressed elegantly walked over. She seemed to be the boy's mother. Originally, she took her son for a walk. On the way, they met a friend and stopped to chat. However, the boy was naughty and walked alone in the garden, which led to the series of events that just happened. The woman walked over and saw her precious baby sitting on the ground, wailing aggrievedly. Mu Yichen, on the other hand, was standing in front of him with a determined expression. Thinking that he had bullied her baby, she immediately walked over and gave him a push. "Why are you bullying my son?" Mu Yichen was stunned when he heard this. Yu walked over with Yueyao, who was crying nonstop. She said angrily, "Auntie, please get this straight. It's obvious that you didn't discipline your son well. Your son was rude and domineering outside and bullied others. Why are you making the accusation? Even if it's your own dog, shouldn't it know how to keep a leash when it goes out? If it runs around and bites people, it'll be too late for regrets." Xiao Yichen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yu's mouth was really vicious. On the surface, she seemed to be talking about the dog, but wasn't she implying that there was a problem with her education? When the woman heard this, she was stunned for a long time. She couldn't believe that such words would come out of the mouth of an 8-year-old child. Chapter 3194. Before Xiao Yichen could open his mouth, Yu retorted harshly, "What I'm about to say isn't human language. How are you going to understand it? Or are you calling yourself AB****? Auntie, if you have the heart, you should spend less time taking care of your old face. Instead, you should think about how to educate your son so that he won't turn into a dog and bite people." Little Yichen was so impressed by her words that he wanted to prostrate himself on the ground and praise her in his heart. How could he retaliate gracefully? This was a textbook example. He didn't use any vulgarities, but every word he said was vicious. As expected, when the woman heard this, her face turned green and red. Instinctively, she raised her hand and wanted to give him a tight slap. However, she immediately realized that the two people in front of her were children. As an adult, if she were to hit her children, people would gossip. At the very least, she should look for their parents to reason with them. "Which family are you from? I'm going to look for your parents later to talk about this. You're so young, but your words are so vicious. You don't have any manners at all. The truth is always harsh to the ears. Manners? It's not up to you to judge whether I have any manners or not. You can't even discipline your own son well, so how can you discipline others?" Yu paused and said, "That's right. I can't expect you to discipline your own son well. The next generation will be the same as the adults. It's obvious from your son's character. I'm sure you won't be any better." As he said this, Yu tugged at Xiao Yichen's arm and said to him, "Brother, let's go." Xiao Yichen nodded. The two of them didn't even look at her as they carried Yueyao into the pram. After this incident, they weren't in the mood to take a leisurely stroll. They were planning to go home. When the woman saw this, she immediately walked over and wanted to say something. However, Mu Yichen had completely lost his patience. He turned around and viciously kicked the trash can at the side. Clang! This valiant kick actually dented the metal door of the trash can. The woman was completely dumbfounded. Mu Yichen said to her, "Get lost. Otherwise, I won't be polite." The woman was so frightened that she couldn't speak. She had never seen such a valiant child who could kick the trash can into such a state. While she was still in a daze, Xiao Yichen and Yu had already pushed the pram and walked far away. When they returned, Yu, to quickly change her. Xiao Yichen said that he would be responsible for his sisters and urged Yu to hurry and change to change. Xiao Yichen said he was going to comfort his sister, so he urged Yu to change quickly. Yu's clothes were dirty, especially the back of his butt, which was stained with dust and mud. When Yu returned to his room, he took off his dirty clothes and changed into a clean set of clothes. When he was changing, he noticed that there were a few bruises on his thigh. His skin was very tender, so when he was pinched a little harder, there would be bruises. Now that he had fallen so hard, there were even bruises. However, he didn't take it to heart. He was worried about Yueyao. When he went out and saw that Yueyao had stopped crying, he was relieved. Mu Yichen was good at coaxing his sister. He couldn't coax her no matter how hard he tried. He was smart enough to clean the toys and disinfect them before placing them in her arms. Chapter 3195. In the afternoon, Wuxia and Xianxia returned. A certain man had just returned and had yet to take off his jacket when he hurriedly ran to the crib. However, little Yueyao wasn't inside. It turned out that the two little guys were holding little Yueyao and sunbathing in the back garden. Wuxia and Xianxia tiptoed to the balcony and saw Xiao Yichen sitting upright with little Yueyao in his arms. Yu was sitting at the door, holding a drawing board and seriously sketching. Yu had been very talented in drawing since he was young. He had never specially learned it because he spent most of his time in the hospital or at home. Hence, he had plenty of time and patience to hold a drawing board and carefully sketch a scene. When he was 5 years old, his sketches were actually quite decent. It was as if he was self-taught. Wuxia deliberately didn't disturb him. When Xiao Yichen saw him, his expression changed. However, he gestured for him to keep quiet and stood behind Yu. Looking at his drawing, he already had a rough outline, but there were no shadows, so the figure wasn't very three-dimensional. Yu held the brush and said calmly, "Daddy, how long are you going to stand behind me?" Wuxia was shocked. "How did you know that I'm standing behind you?" Yu turned around speechlessly and looked at him with a defeated expression. "Daddy, do you think I'm deaf? Can I hear you? Or do you think you're a god who floated all the way here?" Xianxia was amused by him. However, Wuxia was attentive. When he saw that Yu's palm seemed to have some scratches, he immediately grabbed his hand and examined it carefully. "What happened? Why are you scratched?" Yu didn't expect his eyes to be so sharp. He said calmly, "I accidentally fell. It's fine. But let me take a look." Xianxia also hurried over. She held his small hand and looked at it. Seeing that it was only a little abrasion and was not serious, she was relieved. "Why aren't you more careful?" Yu put down the drawing board and asked, "Have you taken the photos?" "What picture?" "Stupid daddy. Of course it's the photo of mommy trying on the gown." Yu looked helpless. "Daddy, your reaction is so slow." Wuxia furrowed his brows. He was both annoyed and amused by the other's mischievous look. Xiao Yichen walked over with little Yueyao in his arms. Little Yueyao was basking comfortably in the sun, and when she saw them return, she became excited. When Xiao Yichen walked closer with her in his arms, little Yueyao couldn't wait to reach out her arms and ask for a hug. This action of hers, however, made Xianxia feel strange. All along, she had thought that her daughter was quite cold and aloof. Usually, when people wanted to hug her, not only did they have to seek permission from Xiao Yichen and Yu, but they also had to seek her opinion. If someone reached out to hug her, she would sometimes look away and turn her face away. This was a sign that she didn't want to be hugged. However, what Xianxia didn't know was that little Yueyao had suffered a lot today. Hence, when she saw them return, she was especially attentive and wanted to hug them for comfort. Wuxia's heart almost melted when he saw her asking for a hug. Chapter 3196. If someone reached out to hug her, she would sometimes look away and turn her little face away. This was a sign that she did not want to be hugged. However, what Xianxia did not know was that little Yueyao had been wronged today. Therefore, when she saw them return, she was especially attentive and wanted to hug them for comfort. Wuxia's heart almost melted when he saw her asking for a hug. In the past, the CEO, who was known for his cold and aloof image in front of the employees of the Xinyu Corporation, had to lower himself and immediately carry the little princess in his arms. Wuxia hugged little Yueyao in his arms, feeling extremely satisfied. Little Yueyao could always evoke infinite tenderness in his heart. Only when he hugged her in his arms did he feel that he truly had the whole world. With such a beautiful daughter, he had no regrets in life. As Wuxia coaxed her, he asked gently, "Yueyao, give daddy a kiss, okay?" Yueyao nestled comfortably in his arms, her two little hands curled into little fists. When she heard his voice, she blinked as if she did not understand. However, her pair of watery eyes were extremely lovable. Wuxia could not help but lower his head and gently peck her little mouth. It had to be said that this kind of mouth-to-mouth kiss was an exclusive right of lovers. However, Yueyao was still so young, and he could not help but kiss her. However, this action was a pure act of a father who loved his daughter to the bone. When Yu was young, Yun Shishir often kissed his little mouth. However, when Yu was 4 years old, she was a little more concerned about this. It was always said that men were different people before and after they fell in love. Before and after they got married, they also had different mentalities. However, most of the people who truly transformed into a responsible man were only after they became fathers. However, there was definitely a process during this process. After 10 months of pregnancy and breastfeeding, a man would truly become mature. For some reason, Yun Shishir felt that ever since Yueyao was born and Mu Yaja officially became a stay-at-home dad, he became especially beautiful. In the morning, no matter how hurried he was, he would always kiss and hug Yueyao before leaving. When she got home from work, the first thing she did was to run to Yueyao's crib and hug her. Even if he was woken up by Yueyao's cries in the middle of the night, he didn't complain. He always rushed to do the dirty and tiring work. Yun Shishir felt that she must have saved the galaxy in her previous life to be able to meet a man who treated her like a treasure in this life. Not every man would understand his wife's hardships. Not all men could dote on their wives like a princess without any complaints. However, this kind of doting was not affected by Yu Yao's birth in the slightest. Sometimes, she seriously wondered if she was having a long dream. When she woke up one morning and woke up from the dream, this man would only be a part of her dream. She was glad that all of this was not a dream. Even if it was a dream, it was a beautiful dream that she would never wake up from. Yun Shishir turned on her phone and showed the two little guys the photo she took. Yu snatched the phone first and looked at the photo. Yun Shishir was wearing an extremely gorgeous Han Tang wedding dress. They were really stunned. Chapter 3197. As the saying went, a phoenix coronet and a red gown was a beautiful sight. Yun Shishir was wearing a red wedding gown and a phoenix coronet with tassels. It was hard to hide her elegance and beauty. Her bright and colorful tassels drew a beautiful arc on her forehead. Her gilded hair swayed as she swayed. Her smooth and soft chin, her bright red lips, and the flirtatious and fiery red flower at the corner of her eyes were incomparably sparkling. With just a glance, she was devastatingly beautiful. Wow. Mommy is so beautiful. Think about it. Mommy relies on her looks to make a living. What about Daddy? Yu asked curiously, is Daddy really wearing a suit? Won't that make him incompatible with Mommy? At the mention of this, Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The wedding planner had originally suggested that Mu Yaja wear a suit while she wore a Han Tang wedding gown. This kind of wedding would give people the feeling of a cross-century marriage. However, in reality, the wedding planner was worried that Mu Yaja wouldn't be able to pull off the ancient style of clothing. A man's Han Chinese costume was different from a woman's. Ordinary men wouldn't be able to pull off a Han Chinese costume to look good. Why else would people say that the handsome men of ancient times were truly handsome men with red lips, white teeth, straight eyebrows, and starry eyes? Suits were one of the greatest inventions in the world. Most men, as long as they were tall enough, would not look too ugly in a suit. However, a Han Chinese costume was different. The wedding planner was worried that Mu Yaja wouldn't be able to pull off a Han Chinese costume. That was why he had suggested it. However, when the two of them arrived at the venue and the stylist saw Mu Yaja in person, she was slightly stunned by his exquisite facial features. In the entertainment industry, he would definitely be a popular young actor. Hence, she said, Chairman Mu, why don't you try on a Han Chinese costume? Mu Yaja changed into a Han Chinese costume and walked out. When everyone saw him, they were completely stunned. A handsome man. Mu Yaja's exquisite facial features were perfect for the traditional Chinese clothing. He even won over the extremely picky stylist. Hence, the wedding planner decided that both of them would wear traditional Chinese clothing. Yu did not believe that her father could look so good in Han Chinese clothing. She had heard her mother describe it so vividly. She had to see it with her own eyes. There was only one photo of Mu Yaja wearing a traditional Chinese costume, and it was taken under her compulsion. Yun Shishir found it and showed it to Yu and Xiao Yichen. When Yu saw it, he was speechless. It was indeed beautiful. Since Yu had achieved perfection, Xiao Yichen had also achieved perfection. In the evening, the family of 5 finished dinner and planned to stroll around the nearby park. Yu suddenly recalled what had happened in the afternoon and was still a little angry. However, just as they were about to leave, Lu Jinyu called and said that he had a document to send over. Mu Yaja snorted coldly in his heart. He said that he was sending a document. Perhaps he was coveting his little princess. Before long, someone knocked on the door. Mu Yaja was a little surprised. He had just finished the call and the person was already at the door? Did he arrive on a rocket? Mu Yaja was carrying Yueyao, so it was not convenient for him to open the door. Yun Shirshir walked over and opened the door. She saw a woman and a man of average height standing outside the door. The woman was holding a child's hand. She was dressed elegantly, but she looked very fierce. Yun Shirshir had just opened the door when the woman, holding the child's hand, barged in fiercely. Chapter 3198. Just as the woman walked in, the man behind her walked in as well. He first nodded at Yun Shirshir as a form of greeting before asking the woman, "Are you mistaken? Are you sure it's this family?" The woman walked in and looked around. When her gaze landed on Xiao Yichen and Yu, she immediately became agitated. "It's them. It's these 2 rascals." When Yu and Xiao Yichen saw her, they immediately recognized her as the unreasonable woman from the afternoon. They were furious. He hadn't settled the score with her yet, but she still dared to come knocking on his door? Mu Yaja was carrying Yueyao. When he saw the woman's aggressive manner, as if she was here to cause trouble, he frowned slightly. The woman's heart skipped a beat when she saw Mu Yaja. It was probably because she had never seen such a young and handsome stay-at-home dad. Seeing him carrying a 5-month-old baby girl in his arms, she could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. This scene had touched her deeply. She had never seen a father so patiently carrying and comforting a baby. In addition to her 8-year-old son, she had given birth to a daughter 10 years ago. However, her husband had always been cold toward this daughter. It was precisely because her husband's family was considered prominent in the capital that they valued boys over girls. Therefore, when she gave birth to a daughter, her husband's family complained a lot. They even used their connections to get her to give birth to another child. However, when she got married, she was already 28 years old. When she gave birth to her daughter, she was already 31 years old. At this point in time, she was already considered an advanced pregnant woman. However, her husband said that she had to have a child. Who would inherit such a huge family business? She could only grit her teeth and bear with the grievances. She painstakingly carried the baby for 10 months. During the pregnancy, it was discovered that it was a daughter. She even had to undergo an abortion. Finally, a son was born. Her husband's family was satisfied. This made her husband's family overjoyed. However, she was the only one who knew the pain and suffering she had to go through. However, she had no choice. She didn't work and relied entirely on her husband to support her. She had to eat every time she opened and closed her mouth. Her husband had never been stingy with her food and clothes. In her heart, it seemed that only by doing this could she be considered a qualified wife. However, her daughter was pitiful. Ever since she was born, other than her and the nanny, no one cared about her. This husband of hers loved his son to the bone. He hugged him every day and talked about his son, but he didn't care about their daughter at all. Compared to this man, who was holding his daughter with such tenderness, she felt her heart ache when she saw this scene. Therefore, this son of his had always lived a life of luxury. He was held in the palm of his hand, spoiled to the point of lawlessness, like a little emperor. However, because her son was favored, her status in her husband's family also rose a lot. "Auntie, so it's you." Yu put her hands on her hips angrily and said coldly, "What are you doing? Are you here to apologize?" "Apologize?" The woman immediately came back to her senses and said angrily, "Shouldn't you be the one apologizing?" Yun Shirshir stepped forward and asked, "What happened? You're this child's parent, right?" The woman glared at her fiercely. Pointing at Xiao Yichen, she said malevolently, "Do you know how to discipline your son? He's already learning how to hit people at such a young age. Now that he's like this, what will happen when he grows up?" Chapter 3199. That's right. He's the one who hit my son. The woman panted with rage as she exaggerated the entire incident. She even added fuel to the fire and accused Xiao Yichen of hitting her precious son. Yun Shirshi's expression remained calm when she heard this. If Yu had gone out to bully others, that might not have been the case. However, Xiao Yichen was such an honest child. He knew that he was strong, so he rarely had physical contact with other children his age. This was because he knew that he was strong and would hurt other children. Moreover, if Xiao Yichen had really hit her son, would the little guy still be standing there unharmed? Xiao Yichen, what exactly happened? Aren't you going to explain it to mommy? Yun Shirshir asked gently. However, the woman did not seem to care. Do you even need to ask? If you ask him, he won't admit it. This child is very mischievous. If you don't teach him a lesson, he'll cause you trouble when he grows up. In front of Mu Yaja, the woman's words were considered polite. However, Yun Shirshir was displeased. Don't judge my child like that. Who do you think you are? I asked my son to explain it to you. Did I ask you? He won't admit it. First of all, he won't lie to me. Yun Shirshir paused for a moment before she continued. If a mother doesn't believe her own child's words, then who else can she believe? Yu and Mu Yichen were both touched and exhilarated when they heard this. Even though Yun Shirshir did not say it explicitly, they knew what her attitude would be. However, they were very touched to see her retaliate so fiercely in front of such a vicious woman. The woman wanted to say something, but Mu Yaja did not have the patience to listen. Shut up. He asked Xiao Yichen, what exactly happened? He bullied Yu. Little Yichen said matter-of-factly. Yu said that his sister's toy fell on the ground. He picked it up and wanted to keep it for himself. He said that since he picked it up, it's his. He even pushed Yu. He was the one who started it. Moreover, I didn't hit him. I only asked him to apologize to Yu. He was scared to tears because he was timid. Why should I be blamed? Mu Yaja's gaze became dangerous when he heard this. You're lying. The woman said, Hui didn't tell me that. Hui was probably the 8-year-old boy who was standing next to her. She said sternly, what Hui told me was that you pushed him, bullied him, and even hit him. Mu Yichen was not happy to entertain her and only said, he's lying. That's enough. The man standing behind the woman had run out of patience. He walked to the table and slammed his palm on the table in front of Mu Yaja. The slap on the table was so serious that it scared the little princess. Little Yueyao's eyes were wide open. Very quickly, her face turned red and she was about to cry. Yu thought to himself, oh no, my sister is going to cry again. Mu Yaja immediately patted her back gently and coaxed her gently, Yueyao, don't cry. Daddy will hug you. His voice was so gentle that it was accompanied by a soft moan. Little Yueyao blinked and swallowed her sobs. The woman was stunned again. Chapter 3200. Usually, when the child was about to cry, her man would try his best to get rid of the child. If he didn't hand the child over to the nanny, he would hand the child over to her. In any case, she didn't have the patience to coax the child. She was so stunned that she even ignored the increasingly dangerous look in Mu Yaja's eyes. The man looked up. His voice was low, but his tone was strong enough. Get out. Why? The woman spoke with conviction, but she was a little angry. My son was bullied, and I haven't even gotten an explanation. What right do you have to chase us out? The woman's husband seemed to have some background. At least, it was apparent from his aura. From the moment he entered the house, it was obvious that he was proud of his status. Hence, his attitude was very arrogant. After all, his son was bullied, and he wanted to get an explanation for his son. Hence, he wanted to see who had bullied his son to this extent. Once he got home, he locked himself in his room and ignored everyone. His heart ached when he saw this. Hence, he thought that no matter who it was, he had to punish them harshly and show them who was boss. This family also lived in Xiangdiwak. This man's status was indeed quite high. He was the executive director of a real estate developer and was quite wealthy. However, he didn't realize that he was also living in Xiangdiwak. In a territory where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, as a neighbor, his background was not to be trifled with either. However, most men were arrogant and flamboyant. Naturally, they overlooked this problem. Perhaps he was too conceited. After all, he was able to achieve what he had today. Ordinary people couldn't compare to him. No matter how high his status was, how could he compare to him? Hence, the man was aggressive and said arrogantly, "Today, I'll put these words out there. You can either get your 2 sons who are in the wrong to come out and apologize to my son. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." When Mu Yazhi heard this, he found it interesting. He passed the little Yueyao to Mu Yichen. Then he slowly stood up from the chair and walked to the man. The difference in height made it difficult for the man to breathe. His height of 1.8 meters was like the weight of Mount Tai to the man who was less than 1.7 meters. The man had no choice but to raise his head to look at him. Mu Yazhi looked down at him with a cold gaze. "As a father, I know my 2 sons' personalities better than anyone else. If they did something wrong, I will definitely correct them and make them apologize. But I know my sons. They won't bully other children." The man couldn't help but feel a little guilty, but he still insisted on keeping up appearances. You weren't there. You said that you wouldn't bully her, but did you see it with your own eyes?" "So, did you see it with your own eyes?" The man was at a loss for words for a moment. If this matter fell into the hands of ordinary people, it would also be a very troublesome trifle. After all, no one was present at the scene. Everyone had their reasons and everyone felt wronged. However, the woman did not give up and said, "I saw it with my own eyes. Your child is grabbing my son's collar fiercely, like a little lion. It looked like it wanted to eat someone. I saw it, how can it not count?" Chapter 32:01. However, the woman said, "My son has everything he wants. We've already bought everything he wants. Why would he care about your lousy toy?" Yu was furious. Lousy toy. This toy couldn't be bought with money. It was a limited edition, and this toy for little Yueyao was a version that he had meticulously designed. It was one of a kind. He had always given his sister the best, but in this woman's mouth, it was just a lousy toy. You say he doesn't care about it, but your son does. Yu walked over and tugged at the corner of Mu Yazhi's shirt. She snorted and said, "Daddy, don't stoop to the level of a shrew like her. Just chase them out. It's a waste of time to talk to them." Yun Shirshir suppressed her anger and said, "Please get out." The man beside her didn't say anything. After all, Mu Yazhi was standing in front of him. His aura was suppressed by so much that he didn't dare to make a fuss. However, the woman continued to pester endlessly, "Do you know who my husband is?" These words were really condescending. Mu Yazhi retorted, "Do I need to know? You'd better know who my husband is. Don't think that just because you live in Xiangdi walk like us, you have a high status. My husband is the executive director of Wanku Real Estate. You know about Wanku Real Estate, right? It's one of the top 500 companies in the world." When Mu Yazhi heard this, he sneered in his heart. There would always be a few frogs at the bottom of the well who would jump out and embarrass themselves. He wondered who it was. So it was Wanku's director. Speaking of which, even Wanku's CEO, Wang Chuanda, had to humbly address him as Chairman Mu when he saw him. He was just a director, yet he was so arrogant. Where did he get his confidence from? Xiao Yichen also knew about Wanku. He had even met Wanku's CEO, Wang Chuanda. In front of Daddy, he also had a fawning face. Why was this man so arrogant? He said coldly, "He's just a mere director of Wanku. I advise you not to embarrass yourselves here." Yu was surprised and interrupted, "Mu Yichen, you're using idioms one after another. You've improved." Mu Yichen blushed and ignored him. He was in a fit of anger. Get lost if you know what's good for you. It was too embarrassing to be chased out of the house by a child. The man behind couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and said, "Today, I was thinking that since we're neighbors, it's not a big deal. Let your child apologize, and we'll make the big deal small, and the small matter will be resolved. But from what I see, you guys don't seem to have any intention of apologizing at all. Then don't blame me for being rude." Yun Shirshir was curious. "How do you want to be impolite? The man was about to say something when footsteps came from outside the door. The group of people turned around curiously and saw Lu Jinyu walking over with a document in his hand. When the man saw him, his expression changed and his eyes widened in surprise. His attitude was respectful. "So Lu, why are you here?" His words surprised Yun Shishir. They knew each other? When Lu Jinyu saw him, he was also very surprised. "Director Zhang, why are you here?" The man was also a little confused. Chapter 3202. Now that the market was in a slump, the global financial system was deteriorating, and the industry was in crisis, it was very difficult for the government to approve land. Without a strong background, it was difficult to get a share of the profits from the government. For a large and powerful corporation like the Wanku Group, they had to bow and lower their posture when they went to the government. But there was nothing they could do. The government refused to give them land. Coincidentally, Wanku coveted an office building, so he took a fancy to the land in the new city. However, this land was auctioned by Xingyu, and they planned to develop the financial street. Therefore, Wanku sent him to communicate with Lu Jinyu, one of the people in charge of Xingyu Corporation, and finally got some ideas. "President Lu, what are you?" Lu Jinyu was also confused by the situation in front of him. Seeing Mu Yaja standing aside with a cold expression, he smiled and said to the man, "President Zhang, you can't be in such a hurry, right? Didn't I tell you that I'm in charge of this development project? What are you doing?" He thought that Director Zhang had come all the way here to talk to Mu Yaja about the project. Director Zhang was even more confused and asked, "President Lu, what's your relationship with this man?" Lu Jinyu smiled. "Don't you know him?" "I don't know him. I only know that he lives here." "Does Director Zhang also live in Xiangdiwak?" "Yes." Lu Jinyu introduced. "This is the chairman of Xingyu Corporation, our boss, President Mu. I didn't expect you to live in the same villa area. I might as well introduce you to him." As soon as he said that, the man was completely stunned, and cold sweat broke out on his back. What did you say?" The man pointed at Mu Yaja and said gloomily, "You said this is... I made it very clear just now." Lu Jinyu didn't have the patience to repeat himself a second time. The man was completely frozen on the spot, not knowing how to deal with the situation. Never in his wildest dreams would he have guessed that the legendary mysterious chairman of Xingyu Financial Group, Mu Yaja, was actually living in the same villa complex as him. He also didn't expect that by accident. He seemed to have offended an extraordinary person. Lu Jinyu also sensed that something was wrong and asked in confusion, "What's going on?" "Uncle Jinyu." Yu ran over and Lu Jinyu immediately picked him up. The little munchkin wrapped his arms around his neck and pointed at the man as he said, "Their whole family came to us and said that we bullied their son. They even wanted us to apologize. You're really unreasonable." The woman didn't understand what was going on. She took a step forward and was about to retort when the man was quick to react. He knew how to judge the situation and immediately pulled her behind him. "Hubby, what are you doing?" The woman asked impatiently. "Honey, let me introduce you." The man swallowed his anger and said in a low voice, "This is the chairman of Xingyu Financial Group, President Mu." The woman was stunned. She had heard her husband mention the Xingyu Financial Group. It was said that the chairman of the Xingyu Financial Group had a powerful background and was famous. Who would have thought that it was him? Such an illustrious figure was actually such a young man? She couldn't keep her face straight and couldn't help but feel uneasy. Earlier, she was still shouting so fiercely, but now she was beaten so badly that she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. But if she had to immediately lower her head and bow her head, she wouldn't be able to back down from the table. Chapter 3203. However, if she were to lower her head and bow immediately, she wouldn't be able to get out of this embarrassing situation. If she immediately behaved humbly, then wouldn't her swaggering earlier be a joke? She couldn't embarrass herself like that. The woman's face was a little dark. This kind of situation was really too awkward, so she just stood there and said nothing. The man was also uneasy. He was afraid that if he said another word he would offend them even more. Hence, he kept his cool and stood nervously at the side. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he snorted coldly. Why else would this society be so snobbish? If it weren't for his daddy's superior status, would they be so timid? This society was ruthless. It didn't make sense to some people who were superior to others. When Lu Jinyu saw this, he said coldly, "Why aren't you getting lost?" When the man heard this, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty. Just as he was about to flee with his wife and son, he suddenly thought of something and turned back to ask carefully, "Xiao Lu, then, this matter won't affect Wuxia and Xianxia's development project, will it?" Lu Jinyu sneered and said, "Whether this matter affects or not depends on our boss's mood. However, if you don't give me a clear explanation, I think you won't be able to keep your position as the executive director." How could this be? The man quickly begged for mercy and said, "Xiao Lu, there's a misunderstanding. You must plead for me. How would I know that I'm lucky enough to live in the same villa area as Xiao Mu? Don't make a fool of yourself here, hurry up and scram." Lu Jinyu's attitude became very cold. When the man heard this, he didn't dare to say another word and hurriedly left. After such an unpleasant incident, Yu and Xiaoyichen were still sulking. Jinyu continued to follow up on the proposal with Wan Ku. However, "Boss, don't worry. Do you think I don't understand what you mean? I'll handle this matter properly." Lu Jinyu was a perceptive person. With one look from Mu Yaja, he immediately understood his intentions. "Put the documents on the table." Lu Jinyu placed the document on the table. Just as he put it down, his eyes secretly drifted in the direction of little Yueyao. His mouth was watering. "Boss, can I hug the little princess?" Asterisk caret 0 caret. Asterisk, Mu Yaja's eyes were cold. Lu Jinyu's face fell. "Why? I knew you had ulterior motives." Mu Yaja snorted. "Deliver documents. I think your motives are not pure, right?" "I'm just hugging." "Boss, how can you be so stingy? When I have a daughter in the future, I'll let you hold her too." However, a certain man was very principled and said, "I have my own daughter. I don't care about other people's." His stance was clear. However, since Lu Jinyu had come and failed to carry the little princess, how could he return empty-handed? He was thick-skinned and called him boss repeatedly. Finally, after much coaxing and pestering, he got his wish to carry the soft and squishy ball. When he carried little Yueyao, Yu and Xiaoyichen stood on either side of her. They were prepared to snatch her back the moment she cried. Chapter 3204. Lu Jinyu finally got what he wanted and carried Yueyao in his arms. Although the way he carried the child was a little inexperienced, it was still considered standard. Previously, the reason why Yueyao kept crying and throwing a tantrum, other than being unable to recognize him, was probably because the way he carried the child was not very correct. After returning home, he consulted the mother around him and learned how to carry a child. Now, he was a little more confident. He carried her carefully, and the little princess reluctantly gave him some face. She did not cry and throw a tantrum like the last time. Instead, she widened her big eyes curiously and looked at him as if she was sizing him up. However, after carrying her for a while, he seemed to be despised by the little princess. Little Yueyao suddenly looked in Mu Yaja's direction and stretched out her chubby little hands, asking for a hug. This action of hers made Mu Yaja feel extremely satisfied. The child can recognize people. That's good. He liked it when his daughter only recognized him and no one else. That way, no one else could covet his daughter. Mu Yaja said, "Yueyao doesn't want you to carry her. Give her to me." Lu Jinyu was a little reluctant when he said that. He pulled a long face and felt a little aggrieved. However, Yueyao struggled fiercely and kicked her little legs as if she despised him. Lu Jinyu was also afraid that something would happen. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only let Mu Yaja carry the little princess away. Of course, after that, the family of 5 said that they were going for a walk in the park. A certain someone shamelessly insisted on tagging along, hoping that when Mu Yaja got tired of carrying her, he would have an excuse to carry her for a while. However, it did not occur to him that Mu Yaja was full of energy. Even if he carried the little princess for a few hours, his arms would not feel tired at all. When he carried Yueyao in his arms, his heart felt heavy. He could not bear to put her down, so how could he feel tired? Hence, after shopping for an entire hour, Lu Jinyu could only watch helplessly from the side. Did he want to hug her? That was basically wishful thinking. Actually, Lu Jinyu didn't care much about children in the past. Hence, when he was in his 20s, he didn't think of getting married. He wanted to find a woman to get married and have children. To him, whether it was a boy or a girl, he wasn't particularly obsessed. However, little Yueyao was born. The moment he saw her, his heart bloomed with love for the little princess. He was even more determined to have a daughter in the future. However, Mu Yaja had also said that instead of coveting his daughter, he might as well get married and have a child himself. The problem was this marriage something that could be done just because one wanted to? In order to get married, one had to find love first, right? Love was too extravagant. It could only be met, and it had nothing to do with preparation. Even though he was mentally prepared, that person just didn't appear. Could it be that he had to find a random woman just to give birth to a daughter? Yu encouraged Yun Shishir and said, "Mommy, why don't you introduce Auntie Xiao Shui to Uncle Jinyu? Auntie Xiao Shui is so pretty and she's a good match for Uncle Jinyu." Yun Shishir and Lu Jinyu said in unison. This was a tacit understanding. Yun Shishir's reason was, "I'm not a matchmaker. Outsiders can't interfere in matters of the heart." However, Lu Jinyu said, "I don't like it when others introduce my girlfriend to me. It's fine if both parties are satisfied, but if they're not, it'll hurt our friendship." Chapter 3205. After taking a walk home, Lu Jinyu also said goodbye. After returning home, he called the vice president of Wanku. He meant to say that there was no problem with Wanku and Xingyu Financial Group's development project, but they would have to change the director. Change the director? There was only one executive director in Wanku. If they wanted to replace him, they would have to fire the original director. The vice president immediately asked him if someone had offended him. Lu Jinyu didn't say much and ended the call hastily. When this matter reached the ears of Zhang Wansan, the executive director of Wanku, he immediately felt uneasy. He originally thought that this matter would be left unsettled. He didn't expect that the man would pursue it to the end. However, Wanku's attitude was very clear. The value of this case was immeasurable. If they missed it, they were afraid that their future cooperation with Xingyu would face difficulties. Wanku didn't want to offend Xingyu, nor did they want to lose this reliable source of cooperation, so they wanted to fire Zhang Wansan. How could they let this go? When Zhang Wansan heard this, he begged his grandfather and grandmother to find connections. He didn't sleep the entire night. Wanku also expressed that he could stay in his position unless Xingyu said that they would no longer make things difficult for Wanku because of this matter. Therefore, Zhang Wansan didn't go to the company the next day, thinking about how to resolve this matter. Both husband and wife realized the seriousness of this matter, so they had a good discussion. In the end, the man suggested that they should personally make a statement. Therefore, the couple carried their gift bags and braced themselves to go to the door, only to find that there was no one at home. Mu Yaja only had one weekend off a week, when he could put aside his company's affairs and rest for a day. On this day, Yu said that the fourth phase of the Fairy Tale Valley theme park project had been completed and that she wanted to experience it. Therefore, the family of 5 got ready and went out. Before leaving, Yun Shishir confirmed the belongings she would bring, including milk bottles, milk powder, diapers. After confirming that everything was ready, the family set off in a grandiose manner. The 4 of them had specially changed into the parent-child outfits that Yu had designed previously. They were white casual shirts, and on the back of each shirt, there was a cartoonish portrait of each of them. This was personally designed by Yu, and it was very lifelike. Fairy Tale Valley was very popular, and it was the most famous theme park in the country. During the weekends and holidays, the flow of people was especially high. However, Yu was not worried about this problem. With just a phone call, he successfully received a VIP card from the ticketing center. With the VIP card, he did not need to line up and was given priority to enter the park. He also did not need to line up for any of the events and could enjoy himself to his heart's content. The last time he came to Fairy Tale Valley was for his 7th birthday. However, There was an accident on the way and he couldn't enjoy himself. This time, the two little guys agreed to play a few more games. Just as they entered the park, Xianxia saw a staff member at the entrance. He was wearing a thick costume and was holding a cartoon balloon in his hand. There were about 50 balloons in his hand, clustered together, and it was very impressive. It also made for a beautiful scene at the entrance. Xianxia walked over and asked for the price. The staff member said that it was 100 yuan each, and VIP cards could receive it for free. Chapter 3206. Xianxia raised her head and saw that Mu Yazhe was nowhere to be seen. She scanned the crowd and finally noticed him. He was tall and slender. Even though he was wearing a casual shirt, a black jazz hat, and a pair of spectacles on the bridge of his nose, such a simple outfit still made him stand out in the crowd because of his noble temperament. He stood in front of a dreamy shop and quietly waited for his turn. When it was his turn, he bought 4 cotton candies. One was pink, one was blue, one was white, and one was yellow. He held 2 cotton candies in each hand and walked towards her. When he walked over, the passers-by kept looking at him and whispering excitedly, "Oh my God, look! That man wearing sunglasses, he looks like a superstar." I heard that Fairy Tale Valley signed Hua Jin as their spokesperson not long ago. I heard that the official website released news that Hua Jin will be attending an event at Fairy Tale Valley as a guest. Could it be today? Are you kidding? Is Hua Jin that tall? He's definitely not a superstar because I've never heard of such a person. In the set, Hua Jin was going through the script when he suddenly sneezed elegantly and said gloomily, "Who's talking bad about me?" The crowd kept getting congested. It was unknown whether it was because the tourists were hiding or because there were many people approaching Mu Yazhe, but the area where the pram stopped was so congested that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Many little fangirls even secretly raised their phones and aimed the camera in Mu Yazhe's direction to take pictures secretly. Click, click, click. Some tourists forgot to turn off the flash. Xianxia felt that she was being secretly photographed and looked in the direction of the light. Taking the cotton candies from Mu Yazhe, Xianxia suddenly said sourly, "Hubby, you're dressed so low-key and there are so many girls surrounding you. You're so charming." Mu Yazhe was a little confused at first and did not know what she was jealous about. It was only when he turned around and saw people crowding around him and secretly taking photos of him that he finally understood the source of her jealousy. He leaned closer to her and deliberately teased her, "Why, are you jealous?" Xianxia snorted, "No way." Yu and Xiao Yichen stood at the side and looked at each other meaningfully. They covered their mouths and snickered. "Daddy, Mommy is jealous. Who told you to attract so many girls?" "That's right. Look, there are so many girls surrounding you and secretly taking pictures of you." Just kidding. Xianxia pursed her lips and was about to take a bite of the cotton candies. However, the man beside her suddenly bent down and took a bite of the cotton candies in her hand. The pink cotton candies quickly turned into sweet sugar stains on his lips and looked especially alluring. "You have your own. Why do you want to eat mine? My wife's is delicious." He licked his lips gently and took the opportunity to hold her hand. He pushed the pram with his other hand and slowly walked forward. This action unconsciously made it clear to everyone that he was already taken. In this way, some people should not be jealous. Chapter 3207. How can this be fake? Look at him pushing the stroller and holding that woman's hand. It looks like he's married and has a child. No way? Sigh. All good men are taken. I don't think so. Who said that a man pushing a stroller must be a father? Maybe it's someone else's child. When Yu heard this, he suddenly curled his lips into a sinister smile. He lowered his head and glanced at the stroller. Little Yueyao was looking at the hydrogen balloons tied to the stroller with her eyes wide open. She actually became excited and waved her hands around, reaching out to grab the balloons as if she wanted to play with them. He fiddled with the hydrogen balloons, causing them to sway slightly. Little Yueyao stared at the hydrogen balloons motionlessly, watching them float around. She became even more excited and kicked her little legs, revealing her soft gums. "Yaya." The tender voice attracted Mu Yazhe's attention. He stopped in his tracks and walked to the front of the stroller. He didn't know when little Yueyao had woken up, but she was smiling so widely that her eyes looked like two crescent moons. His heart softened a little, and he reached out to hug Yueyao. "Come, let Daddy hug you." With this hug, the people around them sighed again and again. He had to call himself Daddy. This young and handsome man must be married and have a child. Yu heard the disappointed discussions around him and sneered in his heart. What are you looking at? His daddy was already taken, so what chance did they have to covet him? The little one was in his arms, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she turned her head and straightened her neck, staring at the hydrogen balloons. She was so excited that she reached out to grab them, but she couldn't. She was so anxious that she kept kicking her legs. Little Yueyao turned her head and patted Mu Yaja's cheeks eagerly. She seemed to be asking him to let her play with the helium balloon. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she immediately untied a rope and held the hydrogen balloon in front of her. Little Yueyao's small hands grasped the rope tightly, but with great strength. Her grip strength was definitely extraordinary among babies of the same age. Yueyao felt that it wasn't enough to just hold on to it, so she tugged harder. The hydrogen balloon swayed in midair and moved up and down as she tugged. Suddenly, the little Yueyao's hand loosened, and the hydrogen balloon broke free of its clamp and slowly floated up into the blue sky. Little Yueyao's eyes widened in surprise as she watched the hydrogen balloon fly higher and higher. It was as if there were countless little stars twinkling in her eyes. It was exceptionally beautiful. Yun Shirshir followed her gaze and looked at the balloons that were rising higher and higher. There was a small heart in the round, transparent balloon. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the scene was dreamy. Yu and Xiao Yichen also looked at the balloons that were constantly rising. Little Yueyao's crisp laughter echoed in their ears. "Ha!" The people around them also stopped and looked up into the sky. Someone exclaimed, "Aya! Whose balloons are flying?" "Oh my God! These balloons cost 100 yuan each. Why do I feel like there's a red 100 yuan bill flying up into the sky? How high can these balloons fly?" Xiao Yichen suddenly felt extremely happy. Her heart was filled with happiness, and she was extremely satisfied. Chapter 3208. He was happy because it was in Fairy Tale Valley that he met Yu and his mommy for the first time. However, he was worried because he did not have enough fun in Fairy Tale Valley. Firstly, the last time he came here with his daddy, Xianxia and Xianxia had tagged along. This was especially so for Xianxia, who kept sticking to his daddy. She either wanted him to accompany her on the merry-go-round or to hug her. His daddy doted on her, so he kept hugging her. He found the scene of his daddy hugging Xianxia to be an eyesore no matter how he looked at it. At that time, he could only follow behind them alone. He watched his daddy carry Xianxia while Xianxia stood beside him. The three of them laughed and chatted happily, looking like a real family of three. He, on the other hand, was the only one left out and felt extremely uncomfortable. He still remembered that Xianxia kept clamoring to ride the merry-go-round at that time. He did not like it. It was not that he was not interested in the merry-go-round, but that he had a stubborn child. No matter how much he liked something that someone he hated liked, he could not bring himself to like it. Therefore, when he saw his daddy carrying Xianxia on the merry-go-round, his heart felt empty. Later on, Xianxia deliberately teased him and slandered him for pushing her. In the end, his daddy escorted her to the hospital and left him alone in Fairy Tale Valley. He felt as if he had been abandoned by the world. But it was different now. His daddy was carrying his sister, and the people walking with him were his mommy, his younger brother, and their family of 5. Especially when he saw his daddy carrying Yueyao with a doting expression, he felt extremely blissful. Xiao Yichen took a bite of the cotton candy and smiled happily. He suddenly tugged at Yu's sleeve and said happily, "Yu, are there any fun activities in Fairy Tale Valley? Let's play together." When Yu heard this, he looked a little lonely. He licked his lips and said helplessly, "There are many activities that I can't play. I can only watch you play." "Are there no activities suitable for you?" "No." Yu pointed at her chest and said, "Some games are too exciting. I feel uncomfortable here and can't breathe." Moreover, he had respiratory syndrome. If he played a game that was too exciting, it would trigger. At that time, it would spoil everyone's mood, and the loss would outweigh the gain. It was rare for the family of 5 to gather together and come out to play. His younger sister was still around. He didn't want to spoil the fun just because of his health. Xiao Yichen knew that because of his health, he couldn't enjoy many events to his heart's content. However, there should be events that suited him, right? Fairy Tale Valley couldn't be filled with exciting activities, could it? What about the merry-go-round? Mu Yichen pointed in the direction of the merry-go-round. This ride isn't exciting. You can ride it. The carousel is fine. The 2 little munchkins walked up to Yun Shirshir and egged her on. Mommy, can you ride the merry-go-round with us? Yun Shirshir had no choice but to ask Mu Yaja to look after little Yueyao. Thus, she held the 2 little guys' hands and walked towards the merry-go-round. With a VIP card in hand, there was no need to line up for any of the events. Mu Yaja sat on a long bench at the side and waited for them to come out after they finished playing. Not long after he sat down, little Yueyao looked a little anxious. He whined like a kitten, as if he wanted something. Chapter 3209. Mu Yaja was quite experienced. He knew that she was hungry and wanted to drink milk. There was milk in the milk bottle that Yun Shirshir had prepared beforehand. He only needed to take it out, shake it evenly, open the lid, and bring the pacifier to her mouth. She took a bite and sucked on the pacifier. Hugging the milk bottle, she sucked on it with relish. She was probably very hungry. Ever since she woke up, she had only drunk a few mouthfuls of milk and had not eaten much. She had been sleeping soundly in Yun Shirshir's arms. When they entered the garden, the little guy's attention was attracted by the hydrogen balloon. Now that there was no attraction, her hunger came. She hugged the milk bottle and drank quickly, but surprisingly, she did not choke. Slow down. Mu Yaja saw that her face was flushed red from drinking too quickly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He could not help but say, "No one is fighting with you." He was afraid that she would suck on the pacifier until it broke. This little guy, really, she had sucked on 2 or 3 of the pacifiers at home. Such a battle record was something that no other baby girl of the same age could achieve. Only his little princess had the ability to do so. Many tourists passed by and saw this scene. They saw a handsome man sitting on a bench with a tender little princess in his arms. He hugged the milk bottle and drank with relish. They could not help but click their tongues in wonder. These days, bringing a baby who was not even a year old out to play, but most of the time, it was the mother who took care of the child. It was very rare to see a father taking care of a child. And such a young and gentle father. Hey, why don't I have such a young and handsome father? If I had such a father, I would wake up laughing in my dreams. Ha! If I had such a father, I probably wouldn't be able to find a boyfriend in this lifetime. Don't tell me you haven't daddy complex. No way. If my father is so handsome, why would he fancy those wild boys outside? These words fell into Mu Yaja's ears without missing a beat. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. These words made his ears feel especially good. Yueyao, did you hear that? Your daddy is so handsome. In the future, if you find a man who isn't as handsome as daddy, don't bring him back. Little Yueyao held the milk bottle and tilted his head as if he didn't understand his words. He blinked his eyes and continued to suck on his beloved milk bottle. By the time Yun Shirshir and the 2 little munchkins came out from the merry-go-round, little Yueyao had already eaten her fill and was sleeping soundly in Mu Yaja's arms. Yun Shirshir walked over to his side. Seeing that the little Yueyao was sleeping soundly, she was shocked when she saw the empty milk bottle next to his hand. You fed her milk? Yes. Xiao Yichen was also so surprised that he picked up the milk bottle and couldn't close his mouth. But he drank it all? Little sister's appetite is so big. Little sister has always been like a wolf drinking milk. If this goes on for a long time, will she gain weight? Yun Shirshir was also worried. Will she eat until she's full? Why didn't you ask her to eat less? I wanted to. Mu Yaja said helplessly. When I tried to snatch her milk bottle, she glared at me angrily and refused to let go of the bottle. If I tried to snatch it from her, she would definitely choke. Chapter 32:10. Burp. It sounded like a small bubble bursting. Yu and Xiao Yichen were amused. Oh my, how could little sister be so cute? They couldn't bear to part with her. Yu wanted to hug her, but the sun was getting brighter. Yun Shirshir was worried that Yueyao would get sunburned, so she urged, "Put Yueyao in the stroller to sleep." Mu Yaja was reluctant to let her go, but the sun was indeed getting brighter. He reluctantly put the little guy in the stroller and pushed it towards the next attraction. "Mommy, do you still remember?" As they passed by Happiness Street, Yu looked at the game stall and said excitedly, "You won a toy for me here before." Yun Shirshir saw this and thought of something. She giggled and said, "I remember. You said you wanted to play before, but you couldn't make many shots." Yu's face instantly turned red. He said indignantly, "That's because I wasn't in shape. Now that I'm playing shooting games, I'll definitely improve." With that, he pulled little Yichen over to the hoop machine. After flashing his VIP card, he took the ball from the hoop and started throwing it indignantly. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja walked over and stood outside the crowd to watch. Yu tried his best to shoot the ball. His face was red from holding back, but it wasn't that he didn't improve. However, in the past, he could only make one shot. Now he could make two. Such a small improvement wasn't worth mentioning. After only half a minute, his stamina couldn't keep up. His accuracy dropped again. In the end, he only managed to score more than 500 points and won a commemorative prize. Yu left the basketball machine dejectedly. Xiao Yichen walked up to him and said, "Yu, Big Brother will win a prize for you." He showed his VIP card as well. Soon, the time started. He grabbed the basketball, his eyes burning with a fierce fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He threw 10 consecutive shots and hit the target every time. Xiao Yichen had great stamina. Furthermore, he was much better at sports than Yu. Therefore, he was naturally gifted at sports like basketball and soccer. He rarely played basketball, and he didn't shoot much either, but his accuracy was surprisingly high. By the time the game ended, he had obtained more than 1,000 points and could get a second prize. Second prize. This prize was already very generous. It was a rare toy from Leji, and Xiao Yichen successfully won it. It was a cute and lifelike little tiger with snow-white fur and emerald-like eyes. It was extremely realistic. Xiao Yichen thought it was just a simple plush toy. When he received the toy, he muttered, "So this is the second prize? It looks very ordinary." "Of course not." Yu scoffed and took the toy from his hand. Then he gently pinched its left paw. With a beep, it entered recording mode. It turned out that this plush toy wasn't an ordinary tiger plush toy. It also had a recording function. Yu said to the tiger's little mouth, "Little Yueyao is the most beautiful princess in the world." Chapter 32:11. Wow. You can play like that? If you press the left paw, the previous recording will be replaced. Little Yichen could not bear to let go of the cub as he smiled from ear to ear. "This is so fun. Did you design this as well?" "Sort of." "What do you mean sort of?" "Not all the toys were designed by me, but the designs were all approved by me." Yu said proudly, "Do you know why Lu Jiwei beat those old toy companies and became the world's #1 toy company?" Xiao Yichen was puzzled. That's because most of the toys designed by adults are perfunctory. Only those who are truly childlike can design toys that all the children in the world like. Yu continued, "Only the children can understand what kind of toys they want." When they passed by the shooting range, Yu suddenly recalled the first time they were at Fairy Tale Valley. Xiao Yichen had hugged a giant panda and stood in line at the entrance of the haunted house. At that time, he was surprised that someone had won the first prize in a shooting game. Later, when he found out that Xiao Yichen had won, he was even more surprised. Why was this guy so good at all kinds of games? "Xiao Yichen, your shooting skills are so good. Go and win a special prize." Xiao Yichen said, "My shooting skills are not even half of Daddy's." Then, Xiao Yichen said to Mu Yaja coquettishly, "Daddy, go and play that shooting game and win a special prize for Yu." Mu Yaja said, "No." "Why?" "It's such a childish game." Yu snorted and said mockingly, Daddy is afraid that he won't be able to play well and will lose face. That's why he didn't dare to accept the challenge. Yun Shirshir laughed in her heart. This method of provocation probably wouldn't work on a certain man. However, the outcome was unexpected. A certain man snorted coldly, stood up and said, "Are you looking down on your daddy's standards? Then daddy can only use his strength to slap his face." Yun Shirshir was confused. "I'll go." Who was the more childish one? Can't you hear such obvious provocation? Mu Yaja walked to the front of the adult design table, showed his VIP card, and said to the staff, "Give me a gun." His appearance attracted the attention of countless people. This man was always so dazzling when he appeared in the crowd. So much so that when he appeared, the surrounding crowd suddenly quietened down. Their gazes fell on this tall and handsome man, sizing him up. Even the staff member couldn't help but become infatuated. After staring blankly for a long time, she blushed and handed the heavy gun to him. Mu Yaja raised his gun, and the countdown began. He aimed at the bullseye and pulled the trigger. The bullet immediately cut through the air and shot out. Although the speed was slow, his aim was accurate. He aimed at the most inflated part of the balloon. He knew very well which part of the balloon was the weakest. Therefore, every bullet that was shot out would be accompanied by the sound of an explosion. The balloon burst. Bang, bang, bang. A few rounds of bullets were fired. None of them missed. Gasps could be heard coming from the surrounding crowd. Chapter 32:12. While everyone was still in shock, Mu Yaja focused on raising the gun. He loaded the gun skillfully and pulled the trigger again. Bang! 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 Along with the sound of balloons bursting, the scoreboard fell to the ground one after another. The crowd was in a heated discussion. This man's marksmanship is amazing. It doesn't look like it's his first time using a gun. Could he be a shooter? Judging from his aura, he seems to be from a military academy. When the last bullet was used, there were still a few seconds left. Mu Yaja put down the gun. The staff member was still in a daze and did not react for a long time. It was only when the time was up that she snapped back to her senses. The man reminded her expressionlessly, "It's time to calculate the points." The staff member collected the scoreboard and calculated the total points. There were more than 800 points. Xiao Yichen was also shocked. He walked over to take a look and saw that there were a few 50 points. Daddy's luck was so good. When he first started playing this game, he only had about 300 points. Daddy's points actually broke the record that he had kept until now. More than 800 points. This was really unprecedented. In the future, Daddy could only break the record on the shooting range for fun. Mu Yaja was not surprised by this result. In fact, it was a good result that he had expected. The staff member smiled and said, "Sir, you have a total of more than 800 points. You can choose any of the prizes on the shooting range, including the special prizes in the area." At this moment, little Yueyao woke up. Yun Shirshir carried Yueyao in her arms. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes and blinked gently. When Xiao Yichen saw that his little sister had woken up, he said to Yu, "Why don't you pick a toy that little sister likes?" When everyone saw this, they could not help but gasp in amazement. This little girl is so cute. Look at her eyes. They're so beautiful. It's no wonder that this little girl is so beautiful. She doesn't even know what kind of genes her parents have. One is handsome and the other is beautiful and gentle. This girl is also a natural beauty. When she grows up, she will definitely be a super beauty. That's great. Now I want to have a daughter too. However, Yu and Xiao Yichen started discussing nervously. My little sister likes dolls. Why don't we get the first prize for the SD doll? But the grand prize is a 1-meter-long giraffe. Yu and Xiao Yichen ran to the prize area. They each picked up an SD doll and a giraffe and walked over to Yueyao for her to choose. "Sister, what kind of toys do you like?" Yun Shirshir hugged Yueyao and asked gently, "Yueyao, your two brothers are asking you what toys do you like." Everyone's gaze fell on little Yueyao. They were curious to see how this adorable little girl would react. Little Yueyao first looked at the SD doll that Yu was holding up high. Her big eyes lit up and she immediately reached out to grab it. She seemed to like it very much. Yeah, she could not speak yet, so she could only babble incoherently. However, from her expression, it seemed that she really liked this doll. Yun Shirshir was curious when she saw this. Yueyao seems to like the SD doll more. When Yu saw that she liked it, he quickly pushed the SD doll into her arms. Chapter 32:13. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he reluctantly hugged the giraffe and squeezed in front of Yu again. He said to Yueyao, little sister, don't you like this doll? It's a giraffe. When you grow up, you can hug it to sleep. When the people around them saw this, their hearts were warmed by this loving scene. These two little brothers must be twins, right? They were so nice to their little sister. It was obvious that these two little guys doted on their little sister a lot. Some of the moms were envious and amused at the same time. Many families would fight over a toy when they had a second child. They were afraid that one of them would be favored and the other would be neglected and ostracized. Sometimes, bickering was unavoidable. Hence, a harmonious relationship between children was extremely rare and precious. When Yueyao saw the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms, she instinctively reached out to grab it. To her, there were so many interesting, fun, and novel things in this world. She would find anything that she had never seen before interesting. However, she was still so young and didn't know how to choose. She only knew that she wanted whatever was given to her. When Yu saw this, she immediately shouted, Mu-Yichen, don't go back on your word. Little sister obviously likes the SD doll more. Susu, you're the one who's going back on your word. If you didn't want to put the SD doll in front of little sister so badly that she can't see the toy in my arms, she wouldn't want your doll. What do you know? All girls like dolls. Especially the SD doll. It's exquisite and realistic. Little sister will love it so much that she won't be able to put it down. The giraffe is still the cutest. Little sister will definitely like the present I choose. The two little guys, one holding the SD doll and the other hugging the giraffe, were arguing about whose present their little sister would like more. The surrounding people burst into good-natured laughter. Mu Yaja's lips twitched. He walked over and said, Why are you arguing again? Daddy, Yu is being shameless. You're the one who's being shameless. I don't care. Anyway, little sister wants an SD doll first. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She asked Yueyao, which brother picked your favorite toy? Yueyao looked at the SD doll in Yu's hands and then looked at the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms. For a moment he was in a dilemma. She then looked at the two little lads who were looking at her with eager eyes. She was so nervous that she held her breath. It was as if this wasn't a toy selection, but a sacred election. In his heart he was shouting, Sister, choose me, choose me. Yueyao suddenly stretched out both of his hands. One of his hands reached for the doll in Yu's arms, while the other hand reached for the giraffe in Xiao Yichen's arms. Yun Shirshir explained, It's broken. Your little sister is greedy. She wants both. Mu Yaja held his forehead and said, Stop arguing. Since Yueyao likes both, then she wants both. He went back to the shooting range and said to the staff, I'll play again. Again. Chapter 32:14. Mu Yaja looked to the side and saw two staff members holding balloons, perspiring profusely. They were blowing them with their cheeks puffed up. They looked at him pleadingly. The staff member immediately tried to smooth things over. Sir, your shooting skills are obvious to all. Why don't we give you both toys? After all, you've earned more than 800 points. When they left Fairy Tale Valley, Mu Yaja pushed a pram with a gigantic giraffe plushie on top of it. Her adorable expression attracted the attention of countless people. Little Yueyao lay in the pram, hugging the SD plushie in her arms. Occasionally she would grab her hair and occasionally play with her limbs. She was overjoyed. Xiao Yichen and Yu were like two guardian deities guarding the pram as they walked towards the parking lot. Yun Shirshir walked at the back. Looking at this scene, she felt as though her heart was filled with something. Sometimes, happiness was just a momentary perception. In a certain frame, her heart was filled with happiness. At this moment, she suddenly felt that everything in her life, everything she had now, there was nothing else she could ask for. In the past, when she was still a young girl, her biggest wish was to meet a man she truly loved and walk into the sacred hall of marriage with him. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt that a grand wedding wasn't that important anymore. Dullness was true. These words were not false. Although life after marriage was peaceful, every day when she hugged him to sleep, she could see his sleeping face when she woke up. She had 2 adorable sons and an adorable daughter. In this life, God treated her well. Everything that she had was not easy to come by, so she knew to cherish it even more. Wuxia pushed the pram and suddenly realized that there was an empty space beside him. He stopped in his tracks and turned around. He saw Xianxia walking slowly behind him. He smiled and extended his hand to her. "Xianxia, hold my hand." Xianxia was stunned. Looking at his outstretched hand, she smiled sweetly and extended her hand to him. He held it fast at once. She caught up to him and heard him say, "There are so many people. Don't get lost." She took his arm and smiled at him. Yes. When the family of 5 returned home, they were met with Zhang Wansan's family, who was waiting at the door. They went to Fairy Tale Valley to play, and the Zhang family really waited at their door for an entire day. Seeing that Wuxia had returned, Zhang Wansan immediately came up to him and personally apologized to him. He didn't want him to lose his job because of such a small matter. On the other hand, the woman at the side secretly shed tears. She seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter and knew that she had offended a big shot. It was too late for regrets. Holding her son's hand, the woman and the child bowed and apologized repeatedly. "Chairman Mu, we know we were wrong. We have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us." The little guy was really frightened. He kept bowing and apologizing. His childish voice was trembling. The arrogance and domineering attitude he had when he bullied Yu was gone. Instead, he was crying helplessly and rubbing his tears. He was extremely sad. It was probably because Zhang Wansan had taught him a lesson yesterday that he knew he was in the wrong. Wuxia was hard-hearted and naturally ignored him. Xiao Yichen and Yu also wanted to enter the house without looking back. Chapter 32:15. The little boy was stunned. He raised his head and looked at the gentle woman in front of him in astonishment. When the child's mother saw this, she had mixed feelings. "Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Mu." "Mommy, why are you paying attention to them?" Yu said unhappily. "Don't bother about them." Xianxia said to them, "You can go back." But Zhang Wansan still looked at Wuxia hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Xianxia seemed to know what was on his mind. She said calmly, "There's a saying that goes, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. This matter is over. I just hope that you will discipline your son well in the future. Children can't be spoiled. They'll be spoiled. I'll definitely discipline my son well. In the future, I won't let him be so unreasonable and bully other children." Zhang Wansan left with his wife and son. Yu looked at their backs as they left. He said unhappily, "Mommy, why are you so gentle to them?" Xianxia suddenly squatted down in front of him and said calmly, "Yu, do you know? Leaving some leeway for others is also leaving some leeway for yourself." Yu seemed to understand. Ever since the incident with Yun Na, Gu Xing's death, and when she regained her sight and could see the world clearly, Xianxia's state of mind had changed greatly. She started to believe in karma. She believed that a good cause would lead to a good outcome. She believed that one should be forgiving whenever possible. Sometimes, there's no need to force people into a dead end. It's not like there's a deep hatred. Sometimes, if you force someone into a dead end, who knows what kind of revenge that person will take out of hatred in their despair. Do you know? Mommy believes in karma now. I only think about how to conduct myself in the world and how to be peaceful. I also hope that what Mommy does can accumulate some karma for all of you. Mommy, don't be afraid. Daddy and you will protect you. However, Xianxia said, compared to being protected by you, Mommy really wants to protect you and not let anyone hurt you. When a person is in despair, they will develop great hatred because of a single mistake. In the midst of hatred, people would often lose their rationality. In other words, If Zhang Wansan really lost his job because of this matter and fell to the bottom of the valley, who knew how ruthless they would be and how they would deal with them? She didn't want anyone to ruin this peaceful happiness. However, according to Mu Yaja's character, even if he didn't make Zhang Wansan lose his job, it was inevitable that he would be demoted a few levels. However, Zhang Wansan was already extremely grateful for this kind of treatment. From then on, the Zhang family became much more well-behaved. Sometimes, when they bumped into each other on the road, they would nod politely and greet each other. Of course, this was all in the future. The date of the wedding has been set. When Gong Jie received the notice and learned that the wedding would be held in a month's time, he was filled with mixed feelings. He made a trip to Hurricane's headquarters but did not return to the Gong family immediately. Instead, he went to take a look at Yun Yeqing, wanting to tell him the good news as soon as possible. Yun Yeqing had been transferred to a ward. His body had yet to fully recover and was still waiting for surgery. However, he had already undergone a few skin grafts, and his face had basically recovered. It was just that it was difficult for such a recovery to be exactly the same as before the disfigurement. Chapter 32:16. Gene regeneration was a huge project. Alice told Gong Jie that it would take more than 30 surgeries to reconstruct his basic functions if he were to fully recover. Of course, the recovery she was referring to was only in a certain sense. For example, the recovery of vocal cords and the functions of other organs. When Gong Jie entered the ward, Yun Yeqing was lying on the bed with an oxygen tube inserted. His eyes were open and he seemed to be awake. The electrocardiogram showed that everything was normal. He walked to the bed, bent down, and called out to Yun Yeqing, "Uncle?" Yun Yeqing turned his head slightly and glanced at him. With much difficulty, he said in a hoarse voice, "Shao Jie, you're back, eh?" Gong Jie sat down by the bed and took out his phone. He found the wedding post and a few wedding photos that Yun Shishir had taken for him. He passed them to him and flipped through them for him to see. At the same time, he said softly to him, "Shishir is getting married soon. Before that, work hard to recuperate. I'll bring you to the wedding venue." Upon hearing this, Yun Yeqing's lifeless eyes opened wide at once. His gaze brightened a little. Shishir is finally getting married. When little Yueyao was born, he was still in a coma after the surgery because of his condition. He could not rush over personally. When he woke up again, he found out from Gong Jie that Yun Shishir had given birth to another daughter. He felt rather gratified that they had made a good son. However, at the same time, he could not help but feel regretful. He could not be by his side when his beloved daughter was giving birth. He even had to see his granddaughter through photos. In the photos, there was a family of 5. Mu Yaja sat by the bed and hugged Yun Shishir in his arms. Yun Shishir was holding little Yueyao and facing the camera. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu were smiling at the camera and making victory gestures. It was warm and beautiful. When he saw it, he felt incomparably gratified. However, when he heard Gong Jie say that he would be bringing him to the wedding venue, he was suddenly put in a spot. If Shishir is getting married, I won't go. When Gong Jie heard this, he was extremely surprised. Why? Xiao Jie, look at me. There are so many VIPs at the wedding. I'm afraid my appearance will scare them off. Uncle, how can you think like that? Gong Jie comforted him. If you don't go, Shishir will be sad again. She would definitely want you to be a witness for such an important occasion. Hearing this, Yun Yeqing felt touched and sad at the same time. He blinked and tears welled up in his eyes. He still felt that he had let her down. Because of Yun Na, he had always been brooding over it. Gong Jie comforted him again. He said, "You're Shishir's father. You're her most important relative." When Yun Yeqing heard this, tears welled up in his eyes again. Only then did he nod and agree to go. However, when Gong Jie left the ward, he recalled what he had just said and was momentarily stunned. You're Shishir's father. You're her most important relative. Then what about her father? Gong Jie returned to the Gong residence absent-mindedly. Just as he walked upstairs, the butler saw him and immediately stopped him. Young master, old master is waiting for you in the study. Father is looking for me?